I call this regular meeting of the San Marcos City Council to order. Today is Tuesday, September 3rd of 2024. The time is 6 p.m. Ms. Trevino, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Prather. Mr. Scott.
Here.
Ms. Garza.
Here.
Mayor Houston.
Here.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Here.
Mr. Gleason.
Here.
And Mr. Mendoza.
Here.
We have a quorum present.
All right, this evening our invocation will be given by the Reverend Rachel Joyner of St. Mark's Episcopal Church. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. Today I have a blessing, a poem of blessing for leaders by John O'Donohue. May you have the grace and wisdom to act kindly, learning to distinguish between what is personal and what is not. May you be hospitable to criticism. May you never put yourself at the center of things. May you act not from arrogance but out of service. May you work on yourself, building up and refining the ways of your mind. May those who work for you know you see and respect them. May you learn to cultivate the art of presence in order to engage with those who meet you. When someone fails or disappoints you, may the graciousness with which you engage be their stairway to renewal and refinement. May you treasure the gifts of the mind through reading and creative thinking so that you can continue as a servant of the frontier, where the new will draw its enrichment from the old and you never become a functionary. May you know the wisdom of deep learning, the healing of wholesome words, the encouragement of the appreciative gaze, the decorum of held dignity, the springtime edge of the bleak question. May you have a mind that loves frontiers so that you can evoke the bright fields that lie beyond the view of the regular eye. May you have good friends to mirror your blind spots. May leadership for you be a true adventure of growth. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Next is our pledges of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Thank you. We are now at the citizen comment portion of our program. The City Council hears citizen comments at work sessions, workshops, and regular meetings. There is a sign-up process and a deadline. If you wanted to speak online, a call-in number and or link will be provided. You may speak once during the citizen comment time period and may not yield time to others. If you speak now about a public hearing topic on tonight's agenda, I ask that you not repeat exactly the same comments again during the public hearing on the same topic. You have 3 minutes to speak when you state your name. A timer is displayed on the screen. You'll start in green. When you get into the yellow, you'll have less than 20 seconds left. When the timer is red, your time to speak is up. I will remind you and a bell will ring. The mayor and council will endeavor to ensure that meetings are conducted in a courteous manner and in an atmosphere free of defamation, intimidation, personal insults, profanity, or threats of violence. If you do any of those, you will hear the gavel, and I will ask you to leave the council chambers. If you need help to do so, our officer will assist you. This is your warning. That means if somebody does something for which that would happen, there will not be a warning, and you'll be allowed to continue and do it the second time. This is your warning. You'll be asked to leave on the first. And tonight, we have, I'll just read everybody's name in this order. Ben Ruby, Noah Brock, Lisa Marie Capoletta, Annie Donovan, Mary Beth Harper, Sean Maycock, and Bobby Levinsky. I think Mr. Ruby is joining us online. Is that correct, Mr. Vino? He's in the participant list. He's here.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Ben Ruby. I am the lead engineer for Axis Industrial Park, and I'm here to discuss and answer any questions you may have on consent item agenda number 4. Thank you.
All right, and next is Noah Brock.
Good evening, Council.
My name's Noah Brock, and I'm here to talk about the proposed Energy Parkway annexation request that was postponed for council to gather more information. I truly hope that you did gather more information over the past 2 weeks that will help you inform your decision tonight. I want to point out a few more facts about the situation that you might not be aware about. In the meets and bounds document for this ordinance, there's a clearly defined roadway easement on the eastern side of FM 1984 called First Track, 24-foot wide, strip, Commissioner's Court, blah, 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 that does not line up with the end of this roadway. This is proof that that was not in alignment at the time of the annexation request. It's even in the actual ordinance. If you look at slide 5 of the presentation later, you can also see this easement, and I did a little zoom in screenshot on that printout for you. Scarborough Lane Development sent a letter on August 16th stating that this roadway lines up directly with the right-of-way in Caldwell County. That is only true now because they moved the easement to put the road where they wanted it. This begs the question, is this where you want it? Scarborough Lane also states that it is their desire to build the entire roadway to city standards within city limits. 2 weeks ago, Ben Ruby stated that they would develop the road in the county if this doesn't pass. What about just moving the road further north to keep it away from houses and within city limits? The entire intersection would be in city limits, and that land was annexed in 2019. The road would still have at least 400 feet of straight perpendicular roadway before it intersects FM 1984. This argument of not having a perpendicular intersection needs to go away. And guess what? We received the traffic impact analysis conveniently on August 21st, the day after the last council meeting. This document should have been included in one of the past 15 public information requests that we submitted since February. It took many back and forth emails to get this included. We are also now being charged for public information requests that span 10 days because the city deems these too large. When we asked last year the best way to stay informed on this, Stephanie Reyes told us to put in public information requests, which we will now have to pay for. Out of the 94 requests that we have submitted, 41 of those have received a first response after the required 10 days. That's a 50% on time, 56% on time. The city of San Marcos is making it increasingly difficult to stay informed on this. And who's keeping you informed on this? Is it the city? Are we giving you more information? By the way, do you know what's in that traffic impact analysis? The original roadway alignment on page 81. There's also a proposal for 6 driveways onto FM 1984 that we assume is truck traffic. Vote no on this, instruct city staff to move that intersection back to its original alignment of September 2023. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Lisa Marie Capoletta, who joins us online.
Hey y'all, in the words of Iron Man, it's good to be back. We need to ensure that the development process is transparent, and when there's not transparency, that is the only reason why citizens feel incumbent to file open records requests. And I think that's important that we solve this perception that community has that you guys have not been transparent. I'm talking about the developer, and I'm also talking about concerns that residents have regarding city staff. Last minute changes by developers and planning departments slipping in pieces of paper. Jane, you know that has happened over years, and you've called them out on it, and we appreciate it. We need it not mitigated, we need it to halt and cease. And the fact that he's citing data, which shocked me as I'm listening to his speech, that is very troubling. The original location of this road is much better because it puts any future roadways into current city limits. The new location puts any future roadway straight into the county, out the smart terminal development agreement. The city staff and council, you stated your concerns about annexing the roadways built into the county and the cost to the taxpayer. And we all know that we're all struggling right now, and we should not have to fund his business endeavors. Additionally, the impact on the tax, any additional monetary taxation is going to be very problematic, specifically for this community. Now, there's conflicting promises. I reviewed the letter from Mr. Kendall dated August 16th, where he states ownership intends to construct a roadway constructing the Loop 110 to FM 1984 solely at the developer's cost. It is our desire to build the entire roadway to standard within city limits. The roadway alignment complies with the proposed alignment with the city's thoroughfare plan. In addition, the roadway lines up directly with Caldwell County right-of-way east of FM 1984, where Energy Parkway will interact. The current proposal counters this promise, and it puts any future roadway outside of the development agreement city limits. Mr. Ruby's statement at the council meeting a few weeks ago, in which he said they will build in the county, it's not annexed, also countered Mr. Kendall's correspondence. Please move the road back to its original location. Now, I find it problematic when there are these conversations before meetings, or when papers are slipped in, when all of these rents have been coming up for years. And then you guys got to keep in mind, we're not paid for our time, for our civic engagement. We don't know what types of materials that this specific facility will be bringing in. We don't know what countries will be involved. And it's troubling to many in our community that we really, not to mention the look and feel. Y'all ran on a campaign promises to protect the neighborhoods and to protect the ecology. And from what I can tell, this plan is far from it. Thank you for your time, and God bless San Marcos.
Our next speaker is Annie Donovan.
Good evening, Council. My name is Annie Donovan, and I'm here to discuss the roadway annexation request of about 7 acres in relation to the Smart Access Truck Terminal. Tonight, I want to focus on slide 10 from the presentation deck, which I have passed out to each of you. I first want to discuss the sentence that states, roadway can be constructed in Caldwell County. A municipal utility district is not required by the county. A few weeks ago, I sent an email regarding this to each of you, which I've also handed out. A few reminders when you consider this slide. In the Caldwell County Development Code, Section 3.4D, it states, if the proposed subdivision is located within the ETJ of a municipality, which this is, it shall follow the provisions of the approved interlocal agreement if one exists. In the interlocal agreement between Caldwell County and San Marcos, page 5, chapter 3, city regulations, it states the city shall enforce its subdivision regulations, including review and approval processes and design and construction standards within its ETJ. However, in this case, there is a development agreement in place which supersedes the interlocal agreement. Page 3 of the Smart Terminal Development Agreement, section 1.04 development standards, it states, A, all city of San Marcos codes and ordinances in effect on the effective date of this agreement shall govern throughout the term of this project except as noted within this agreement. Additionally, a letter from the developer states it is our desire to build the entire roadway to city standards and within city limits. There are 3 legal documents stating that the developer must annex and must build to city codes, and a letter from the developer directly saying that they want to build within city limits to city standards. Looking back at slide 10 from the deck, I have highlighted, sorry, I ran out of time, but anyway, it's in there. Development in the ETJ without development agreement would not be held to these higher standards. If you look at the map that I provided, if you look at map A, that's the current proposal. You can see that the proposed roadway alignment, the future roadway falls outside of the development agreement, and it also falls outside of city limits. In comparison, if you look at map B, which was the original roadway alignment, it falls within the development agreement and mostly city limits. So what does it look like to you? What does the developer want to do? Are they wanting to build outside of the city limits, or anyway, so some of you may think we're opposing this just because we can. We oppose this because we want San Marcos to build smart development that doesn't pollute our river and force citizens out of their homes. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Mary Beth Harper.
I'm Mary Beth Harper, and I live in the Martindale ETJ. I've been opposed to the Smart Terminal Access Logistics Park since it was first proposed back in 2015. There are too many environmental problems with this 2,000-acre heavy industry property. Y'all have already heard previously about the noise and light pollution, dust, everything out there that will occur 24/7 once there's trucks rolling full-time. Also, there's increased potential for hazardous waste to flow into the San Marcos River. The proposed truck route, or Energy Parkway, whatever they want to call it, connects FM 110, that's the loop, that's on the west, to FM 1984, that's Reedville Road, to the east. Okay, both of those roads are two-lane roads. Reedville Road doesn't even have paved shoulders, just 2 lanes. Okay, this truck route, or Energy Parkway, is 4 lanes. It's been proposed by Kimley Horn, the engineer, that 25,000 trucks per day would use this truck route. And 1984 is not built for heavy trucks. It will wear out real quickly. Okay, my main concern is the intersection of this truck route with 1984. And again, the development agreement that y'all have seen, and also the new version of it, whatever, I don't understand why it keeps changing. But anyway, that intersection is, it ends up right in front of somebody's house. If the truck route was moved further north, it would be mostly in the San Marcos city limits. It's already in zone city limits. Very little of it would be in the city's ETJ. Also, it would not be as close to existing neighborhoods. The city engineer was concerned that moving the intersection further north, as was in the original development agreement, would cause the trucks to have to negotiate a real sharp turn. Guess what? Where 1984 intersects with Highway 80, there's a really sharp turn. That's been there for years. If you vote to approve annexation, you will lose the ability to renegotiate the location of that truck road. It needs to be further north. Also, please pay attention to the location of the Martindale ETJ line. Okay, north of Memory Lawn Cemetery, there's a piece of it that's in Martindale ETJ, and the developer placed or donated his land to build a fire station. And the taxpayers of San Marcos are going to have to pay for this fire station in the Martindale ETJ.
Our next speaker is Sean Maycock, who is in chambers.
Good evening, guys. Thanks for everybody being here. Lord knows I don't want to be here. Thank you for your time this evening. My name is Sean Maycock. I'm the owner of Blue Skies Aviation. I have been in business at the airport in San Marcos for 19 years, and I would like to make a request about item 13 on tonight's consent agenda. If my request is something that can be amended and approved tonight, then I would like to ask for it to be done so. I'd like to request a lower lease rate than what is being proposed. This is for a hangar that I have owned since 2012, and the ground lease is expiring the 27th of this month. This hangar is also where most of our business is performed, and here's why a reduction would be appropriate. Firstly, when another business signed their first hangar lease in San Marcos in 2017, they benefited from a lower rate, and the reason for that lower rate was because their hangar that they leased lacked office spaces. My hangar also lacked office space, making it fair to consider it for a similar rate adjustment. Secondly, I am currently already leasing one large hangar from the city of San Marcos, and this will be the second. Both of these hangars are and will be under long-term lease agreements, and it's a standard practice in commercial leasing to offer lower lease rates or discounts for such long-term commitments, especially when there is more than one property that is being leased by a single entity. This would be a reasonable adjustment given the scale of the lease. I'm requesting a lease rate, hear me out, of $2.50 per square foot per year. I don't expect to get that, but start low and go from there, right? This rate reflects not only historical context, but also balances out where the new leases have requirements for us tenants to require up to $5,000 in repair costs that may arise to the buildings. This added financial responsibility is significant and warrants a reconsideration of the proposed lease rates. Other airports that have similar lease rates than ours do not require their tenants to be responsible for such a high amount in repair costs if something was to arise. Lastly, as a local disabled veteran-owned small business, I have been present in many council meetings, and I have seen the city's commitment to supporting local businesses, minority-owned businesses, and veteran-owned businesses. I'm requesting that this tradition of support be extended to garnering a lower lease rate for this property. In summary, a lower lease rate is consistent with past practices, aligns with industry norms for the long-term leases, and helps offset the additional repair costs we're assuming. I feel it is also important to point out the economic and population differences in what was used to get comparative pricing for commercial hangar space from other airports in Texas in order to come up with the current proposed lease rate. Your support would be greatly appreciated and would significantly aid in the growth and sustainability of my local business. I also want to point out that our airport managers, Texas
And your
Aviation
time is
Partners,
up.
have been doing a real great job at the airport and have made some positive changes.
Okay. Our last speaker is Bobby Levinsky, who is here.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is Bobby Levinsky. I am a resident and a homeowner of San Marcos, and I'm also an attorney with the Save Our Springs Alliance. I speak tonight from both perspectives. I sent in a letter, I think last council meeting, about the Axis truck terminal, so I want to make sure to get those comments on record. Recently, I had the opportunity to speak with Noah and Annie Brock about the proposed Axis truck terminal. I empathize tremendously with them as residents who would be immediately impacted by the proposed truck terminal, and I join them in encouraging the city to reject the proposed reconfiguration of the roadway. It appears that only a portion of the road is being annexed into the city limits. So from the claim that it's to get city compliance with environmental standards for the city, I don't find that very compelling. The extensive destruction of the creek land in the downstream river, including excessive cut and fill and endless pavement associated with the development itself, negates any minimal benefit of including the road as a portion of the city limits. I hear it was also suggested that the road could serve as a buffer for an adjacent residence. A road primarily used by heavy trucks, 18-wheelers, is not a buffer. It is a hazard. Green space is a buffer. Compatible land use is a buffer. They shared several legal concerns. I'm an attorney who's dealt with development agreements in the past. I share them, those concerns that they raised. There's a lot of problems with that development agreement. And I know that you've talked about some of them. Just kind of looking at what I saw administrative approvals of amendments, delegation of legislative authority, adjustments to the land use and zoning requirements that shouldn't be delegated to the city staff, amendments to floodplain regulations, and the reconfiguration of this roadway itself. At a minimum, these concerns should be addressed by the City Council before further amending the terms of the agreement in a way that the developer can add to their land and create a hazard to the adjacent neighborhood. As a taxpayer of the City of San Marcos, I do not want my city funding anything associated with this project. It is essentially a giant slab of pavement for trucks surrounded by an inadequate road network. To the extent this project was ever considered smart, it is difficult to see what remaining benefits there are to the city. There's no rail, no direct connection to the airport. It sounds like many of you have had shared some of these concerns in the past, and I just want to make sure that you have another resident from the City of San Marcos that's encouraging action against that terminal. Thank you.
And that concludes the citizen comment portion of our program. We will move on to item 1. Mr. Trevino.
Receive a presentation from Deloitte & Touche LLP on the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Quarterly Internal Audit Report, including housing program activities, and provide direction to staff.
Mr. Locker.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. Carlos Diaz of Deloitte is with us via Zoom this evening, and he's going to provide an overview of the first quarter audit results.
Well, hi, good evening, City of San Marcos, Council and City staff. As well presented, I'm Carlos Diaz, and I'm here to present the Q1 audit report. The scope of and objectives of this report is basically oversee all the expenditure, procurement, contracts for the CDBG-DR programs within the city from the disaster from the floods from 2015. So the scope of this review, we reviewed the fiscal quarter of 2024 from October 1st through December 31, aka Q1. We oversaw the aforementioned items when it comes to expenditures, procurement, and contracts. And then we also go and interview city staff and just verify that, all I's are dotted and all T's are crossed. After that, we just reviewed any prior audit finding and just make sure that they've been addressed. So for that, there are no audit findings from prior ones, and there's no existing ones to follow up on. And then when it comes to our observations, our review results, again, there were no findings or observations found in this report. The procedures and internal controls on the city were found to be working as defined, and no issues of non-compliance with federal or city regulations were identified. So, quick story short, the city's rocking. They're doing a great job. I congratulate them for another clean quarter. I think we're at third or fourth in a row. So everything's looking great. Does anybody of you have any questions for me?
Questions, council? We're good.
Well, I thank you for your time. I hope all of you have a great night and bless the city of San Marcos.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Mr. Vino, moving on to item 2.
Receive a staff presentation of the quarter ended March 31, 2024 financial report and provide direction to the city manager.
Mr. Locke.
Thank you again, Mayor and City Council. This is the financial activity covering the period from October through March 31st, 2024. And this was presented to the Finance and Audit Committee on July 9th. And throughout the budget process, we have provided more recent information, so I'm going to move fairly quickly through this. Please let me know if you have any questions that you want me to focus on as we move through the slides. We begin by looking at the city's largest fund, and that's our general fund. Just the layout of the slide, on the left-hand side, you have the 2024 year-to-date activity. The solid green is the actual revenues, and the green stripe is the budget for fiscal year 24. The blue is the actual expenses year-to-date, and the blue stripe is the budget for fiscal year 2024. On the right-hand side, you have the same information, but in the 2023 for comparison. And to the far right, you have the numbers that are behind the graph itself. The main thing to point out on this slide, it's what we've talked a lot about this year with the general fund and that sales tax being down. As of this point in the fiscal year, our sales tax was down about 2% or $500,000 year over year. We're currently forecasting that through the end of this fiscal year that we will be short $3.4 million from budget. And staff has identified $2.4 million in savings to date. There's some other areas that we're exploring to get some additional savings to help close that gap. This next slide will provide some more detailed information on the general fund revenues. It just outlines some of the major revenue categories. You'll see sales tax and property taxes are the largest revenue categories within the city. And in total, we make up the general fund's budget is $111 million. Through this point in the year, we've collected $70 million or 63%. It's typical for us at this point in the year, we're about 50%. So if you're thinking about trends as you look through where we're at percentage-wise, 50% would be about halfway through the year. We collect more revenue at the beginning of the year because property tax is due prior to February 1st. On the next slide, you have expenses. The largest expense category is personnel. It makes up 64% of the total budget and for fiscal year 2024. You can see that we've spent about 45%, and we're about 50% of the way through the fiscal year. There is some seasonal positions when you think about parks and recreation. So we'll see that increase. There is some seasonality there as we move throughout the summer months. But in total, we have spent $49 million, which is about just under 42% of our total budget. Moving on to our enterprise funds, the largest enterprise fund is the electric utility. Through March, we had collected 45% of our total revenue budget, which is about where we were at this same time last year. It's typical for us to collect, especially with electric, water, wastewater, less than 50% through March. When you get into the summer months and people run their air conditioners more, that tends to be where we generate the more of the revenue for both electric, and then when we get to water, wastewater, the same thing in terms of people watering their lawns. In the water, wastewater fund, we've collected 47% of revenues, which is about the same point that we were at this point last year. Couple of things to point out on this slide. The total expenses, we've spent 29.5%, which is under the significantly under where we were at this point last year at 33%. The reason for this, there's $5 million of capital outlay in the fiscal year 24 budget for water wastewater that has not been spent yet. There's $2.5 million that was going to be used for the capital improvement program, and the rest of that was for replacement of large equipment. And stormwater management, we've collected just under 50% of our total revenue. This, unlike electric and water wastewater, is more predictable. And so we've collected about the same amount as what we did at the same point last year. Same for the expense side. One thing I was going to mention, you may notice in the first three enterprise funds, the electric, water, wastewater, and stormwater, the expenses tend to lag behind. If you look at the total expense, we've only spent 30% of the total expense budget. That's because a significant amount of the expense is the debt service within these funds, and the principal payments are due in August. So you'll see that when we do the fourth quarter report, you'll see a lot of that catch up. And our resource recovery fund, we've collected over 50% of revenues through this point in the year. So that tells us that the assumptions that we used estimating growth, that we've grown a little quicker than what those assumptions are. We've also already received the county's $80,000 contribution towards the Household Hazardous Waste Program. And when you compare that to the prior year, we hadn't received it at that point. So that's part of the reason for the difference in the total amount collected at this point of the year compared to last. And the last enterprise fund that we'll discuss is the airport fund. Through March, we have collected about $25,000 of more revenue than what we collected at this same point last year. Our expenses are also up $57,000 compared to the same point that we were last year. The increase in expenses is due to the operational contract that we have with the operator. There is an automatic increase inflator of 2%. Built into the agreement, and there was an additional $80,000 added on to the agreement this year to help fund an additional position at the airport. With the airport growing, they needed additional assistance at the airport to keep up with the demand. And the last fund that we'll go over is the hotel tax fund. And the total revenues are a little lower than where we would expect them to be at this point of the year. This is something that we've discussed a little throughout the budget process, that the hotel tax revenues are coming in where we thought that they would be. So we're estimating that they'll finish about $200,000 short of budget by the time that we get to the end of the year. And you'll see on the expense side, we've spent 39% compared to 29% in the prior year. This is due to the conference center cooling tower that was replaced. That was replaced at $400,000, and that's the reason why we spent a significant amount more at this point of the year compared to last. And that concludes my presentation. Be happy to answer any questions.
Council, questions? Good presentation.
Thank you.
Must have covered everything we needed. All right, so That concludes item 2. We'll move on to item 3. Ms. Trevino.
Receive a staff presentation of the quarter ended March 31, 2024 investment report and provide direction to city manager.
Thank you again, Mayor and City Council. This is the quarterly investment report that covers that same time period through March 31st, and this was also provided to the Finance and Audit Committee on July 9th. We begin with an overview of the economy. We talk a lot about what the Federal and Open Market Committee is doing. As they adjust rates, it has a direct impact on the types of investments that the city's able to invest in, so it has an impact on the rates that we get for our portfolio. Right now, that federal funds rate is between 5.25% and 5.5%, and there's been no change to that since July of 2023. There has been a lot of talk that there may be some change when the Federal Open Market Committee meet later on this month, that there might be a cut, and I guess we'll see in a couple weeks. What the committee is trying to do is reduce inflation to a rate of 2% over a period of time. As at the time of this report, the Consumer Price Index was 3.5%. Since then, for the month of July, it was 2.9%. So you can see that inflation is coming down. When you adjust that for food and energy, and I apologize, this is, it says 3.8, that should say 3.2. As of March, it was 3.2. No, I'm sorry, that is correct. It should be 3.8%. So disregard what I said. That is correct. Less food and energy should be 3.8%. That was adjusted. As of July, it was 3.2. So you can see that is also trending down. Looking at unemployment, as of March, San Marcos unemployment was 3.6%. And when you compare that to Texas at 4.1 and the U.S. nationwide 3.9, we were trending lower. The most recent numbers in July, all of them are trending up. San Marcos is 4.1, Texas is 4.4, and nationwide in U.S. is 4.5. So we're still lower than the Texas and nationwide numbers. This slide provides an overview of the city's total investment portfolio. If you look under March 31st, 2024, the total amount is $373 million. And you can compare that to the end of last quarter in December 31, the total amount was $339 million. So there's been an increase, which we would expect to see, especially with the influx of the property taxes coming in the December-January time period. The middle section shows the yields on the city's portfolio. The total portfolio had a yield of just over 5%. When you compare that to where we were at the December time period, it was 4.8, so our yield is increasing. Looking at the rolling 12-month average, as of March 31st, it was 4.4%, which is up from 3.7 in the month of December. The very last section provides the total interest earnings just for that quarter. So total interest earnings were $4.4 million. Year to date through March, it was $8.5 million. And that is up from $4.7 million at this same point last year. And that is really just driven by the increase in the federal funds rate. The next slide will break down the investment value by fund type. We invest our funds based on the enterprise funds and then what we call consolidated funds, which are just all the other funds. So in total, if you look at the first and the third column, that is the amount for March 31st for the consolidated and the enterprise fund. And in total, it's $373 million. That's the amount that was on that slide that we just covered. The blue represents what we call regular cash, and the green are the reserves. So that's what is set aside that for the some emergency expense that we may have in the future. You can compare that to where we were if you look at the second and fourth column at the December 31st, 2023. And As we've already discussed, for the consolidated funds, you see the increase from 122 to 153. That is due to that influx of the property tax. This next slide just takes that 153 in the consolidated funds, and it breaks it out by all the different fund types that make up that $153 million. The largest of which is the general fund, you see at the 43 million. And then you also have, in addition to that, the general fund reserves, which is the $23 million. All the governmental type capital improvement projects is the second most. And as you see, they're just under $38 million. The next slide provides the same information for our enterprise funds. So that's the total enterprise portfolio is $220 million, and by far the capital improvement program funds make up the bulk of that, with the water, wastewater, utility, the electric utility, and the stormwater utility CIP funds making up the majority of that amount. The next slide covers our investment diversification, and what this has is what our investment policy, the types of investments that we're allowed to invest in, and it's limited. So you see the allowable percent there. We can't go over that amount. Just to cover some of the significant changes, if you look at the fiscal year 2024 Q2 and compare that to the Q1, the biggest change is in the federal agency securities. You see a decrease of 14%, and then an increase in the local government investment pools and money market mutual funds that, and combined, make up that same 14%. This is due to some maturities that we had in federal securities. Since the time of this report, we've purchased over $90 million in additional federal securities. So in future investment reports that you see, you'll see that number will come back up. And the final slide is just compares us to the benchmark. And the top two lines is the blue and green with the triangles. That is the Treasury benchmark. The next two below that, the blue and gray, is what we call the regular cash that we just discussed. And then the two below that is the orange and yellow, and those are the reserves. You can see over time how the city's regular cash and reserves have caught up with the Treasury benchmarks. And what we'll see in the future as the feds begin to cut rates, that the benchmarks will actually fall quicker and our returns will stay higher. And that concludes the presentation. I'd be happy to address any questions you may have.
Council, any questions? Again, clear presentation.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, council, we are now to the consent agenda. The following ordinances, resolutions, and other items, numbered 4 through 18, may be acted upon by one motion. No separate discussion or action is necessary unless someone wants to pull that item, in which case we will consider it after our public hearings.
I'd like to pull 13, please.
Mr. Scott wants to pull 13. I'm going to pull 4. I have a question for staff that came up to, in citizen comment. Any others? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve 5 through 12 and 13 through 18.
So moved.
All right, it was a motion
Second.
by Mr. Gleason, seconded by Mr. Mendoza. We will vote on those first. Mr. Trevino.
Did you say 13?
Oh, it's buttons. Oh, and I've got something on top of my buttons.
Well, what if I have a no on one thing?
You would tell Mr. Trevino.
Okay. I'll wait, I guess.
Do you still want to vote, and then you can still?
Yeah, because it's like yes for everything, but,
Okay. So the motion passes 6-0 with Ms. Garza.
Garza's going to tell you which one she's voting no on.
Number 4?
Oh, I pulled it,
Oh,
so we're not
JK.
voting on it yet?
I feel like there's another one. Sorry, y'all. I don't know my laptop and my internet hates me. Maybe not. You pulled which one?
13.
You pulled 13.
guess 14 then. I don't feel comfortable voting on that, yeah.
Okay.
On number what again?
1-4.
114. Okay, thank you. Okay, motion passes 7-0 with Ms. Garza voting no on number 14.
Okay. All right, so we will move on to our public hearings. And council, this is where I've got to read some stuff for legal reasons on a couple of these. Mr. Trevino.
Receive a staff presentation, hold a public hearing to receive comments for or against ordinance 2024-40, adopting an operating budget in the amount of $342,578,537 for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2024, and ending September 30, 2025, authorizing certain adjustments to the budget with the approval of the city manager, approving fiscal year 2024-2025 capital improvements program projects in the amount of $84,855,000, including procedural provisions, and declare an effective date, and consider approval of ordinance 2024-40 on the first of two readings.
Okay, and I need to make the following statements. State law requires that the city hold public hearings on the city's budget. This agenda item is the first of such public hearings for the city's fiscal year beginning October 1 of 2024 and ending on September 30th of 2025. There will be a second public hearing on September 7th, 2024. The public is invited to make comments
Oh,
for,
Mayor, just 17th.
I'm sorry, what did I say?
7th.
You're correct. There'll be a second public hearing on September 17th. Thank you. 2024. The public is invited to make comments for or against items in the budget. The budget has been on file in the city clerk's office and on the city's website since August 16th of 2024. Notice of this public hearing was published in a local newspaper, the San Marcos Daily Record, on August 25th of 2024. After receiving public comments, the city council will approve the budget ordinance on first reading. The city council will actually adopt the budget on the second reading of the budget ordinance at the city council meeting scheduled for 6 p.m. September 17th, 2024 at San Marcos City Hall. Presentation.
We'll begin with the budget calendar. As you see, we're nearing the end. We'll hold several public hearings this evening, and then we'll have an additional public hearing on the budget and the tax rate on the 17th, and that's when City Council will make the final consideration on adopting the budget and setting the tax rate. This is an overall summary of the fiscal year 2025 budget. Moving from left to right, it has the name of the fund, so the general fund being the first fund. It has the beginning fund balance for the general fund, that's $42 million. The proposed revenues, which is just under $113 million for the general fund, then the proposed expenses, which is $123 million, and then the ending fund balance, which is $32 million. So when you add all of the citywide funds up, the total proposed revenues is $337 million, and the total expenses are $342 million. Going over just a couple of the highlights in the fiscal year 2025 budget, the tax rate is proposed to remain the same at 60.3 cents. Staffing increased to support core services and city council's strategic goals. In total, there are 15 new positions added. 3 of those are for police and 5 are budget neutral. That meaning that either expenses within that department were reduced to be able to add that position, or the position brought in additional revenues to help cover it. 2 positions were moved into the general fund, those being from the Community Development Block Grant as well as Community Enhancement. There's a cost of living adjustment included in the 25 budget. There's a 3% for all the non-civil service employees at a cost of $2 million, and that's for all funds across the city. And then there's a contractual increase of 5% cost of living adjustment for the civil service, which at a cost of $1.3 million. There's also the reestablishment of the Employee Home Buyer Assistance Program that we've discussed throughout the budget process of $50,000. Continuing on, this is the fund balance in excess of 25%. There's $4 million being set aside for the Hopkins redevelopment future City Hall project. There's, in total, across all funds, and there's $5.7 million in capital outlay. The capital improvement program that Mr. Sean Condor, the Director of Engineering and CIP, provided an overview to City Council earlier during the work session, is just under $85 million. The next two items are hotel occupancy tax items. The second half of wayfinding is $500,000, and then the historical restoration and preservation, $438,000 is included in the budget. And the utility funds, and this is really speaking to the electric and the water wastewater, they meet the minimum debt service coverage ratio with the recommended Citizen Utility Advisory Board rate adjustments. And this next slide provides a utility bill comparison. This is just for the average residential ratepayer that also does have electric. If you look in the first column, the total for all of the city utilities is $259. If the next column over for the proposed, with all of the proposed rate adjustments, would be $272. The difference would be $13 a month, or 5.5% of an increase. And next steps, as we discussed when we opened, that there will be another public hearing on the budget and the tax rate on September 17th. We will also hold a public hearing on the fiscal year 2025 fee schedule at the next City Council meeting. And there will be a vote to adopt the fiscal year 2025 budget, to ratify the property tax revenue increase, and to set the tax rate. And that concludes the presentation.
I will open the public hearing at this point. And is there anyone in chambers or in the lobby wishing to comment on the budget? Anyone? I believe we have someone signed up to speak online. Hold on, let me get there.
Hey y'all, good evening. My name is Professor Lisa Marie Capoletta. They call me LMC. I live at 1322 Belvin. For context, when I used to go to these meetings all the time, I kind of use it as study hall, right? I get a lot of work done and I listen while I'm working. My jaw dropped when I heard that gap. And I would like for you guys today to have a conversation with this community about that gap. From what I can understand, they're getting a $1.3 million in home buyers assistance. They're getting raises, and 64% of your total budget is personnel. And he mentioned million or millions of dollars in the gap. Very few people in this community can sort through that much documentation in less than a month. It's by design. I want to address a critical issue that affects every member of our community and the need for equity and budget discussions. As we deliberate and make decisions about how to allocate resources, it is paramount that we employ language that promotes fairness and inclusivity. It is the poorest of the poor, the missing middle, and those struggling to keep their businesses from the pandemic whose voices are locked out of this process. Why not be transparent and hold meetings breaking this down for the working poor, the missing middle, and those with not the degree of education and privilege that I grew up with? Don't you want their insights? Don't you want their wisdom? Don't you want their input? Don't you want their feedback about how they're making decisions about paying for medicine or food or pet food, all because city staff want more raises? I am asking you tonight to talk about that gap. The public deserves to hear that, not at the rate of his rate of speed, right? But to actually have an honest and authentic discussion about it. Furthermore, using language for equity fosters transparency and trust between city officials and the community. It communicates the commitment of our city to prioritize the needs of the marginalized and unserved populations, and it demonstrates that everybody's voice is heard and respected in the decision-making process. In addition, employing equitable language in budget discussions aligns with our city's core values, and it also promotes justice and fairness. It reflects our dedication to create a community where everyone has equal opportunity to thrive, regardless of their background, regardless of their economic level, and regardless of their education or their ability to stop what they're doing and sift through those documents on such a short notice. Saying that we post at the library and saying that was published in the newspaper, you guys know they're not reading it. And if they're not reading it, you need to ask yourselves why, unless it's by design, that you don't want them to read it, you don't want them to show it up, because let's see how many people else speak at this public hearing tonight. Thank you for your time, and God bless you.
I don't have anyone else on my list. Mr. Trevino, is that correct? Didn't know if there was any late-breaking news on that. Okay. So council? Oh, I need to close the public hearing, and I'm looking for a motion on the budget on item 19.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Prather.
Second.
Second by Mr. Mendoza. Questions, comments?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
LMC's commentary reminded me of a conversation that we had brought up when Councilman Baker was still around. We had thrown around the idea of exploring or interweaving more participatory budget framework. And I want to also add, I do acknowledge the strides and like all the paperwork and all the ways that you guys present information thus far. I feel like it is a lot better than a lot of our communities, but I still think there's like areas of growth. So I'm just like wondering if is there any plans to further engage, like concrete plans in the future, so that the concerns that Ms. Copoletta brought up are addressed.
So what we do now is we do have the neighborhood commission, and that's who we've used in order to present the budget, in order to present the CIP. And so we have done that for the last 2 years. Last year, we did it kind of later in the process because it was new. This time, we went at the very beginning of the process so that it was something where we could get actually some feedback if there was something that they wanted to provide, so that we could share that with mayor and council. And those those meetings are posted. And so that is what we've done. We don't have any other plans that we've talked about at this particular juncture. Now, I know that with Grisel doing her dream sessions, that we can look at some different things that we can incorporate with some of that process too, to try to look at some issues if there's something that we want to put there. Like I think it's in October, she has one coming up in regard to the barriers with some of the criminal justice system and that. So there will be some of those issues that we can discuss. So if there's something else that council would like for us to look at, then that's something that y'all can give us that direction if you'd like us to expand further.
All right, I appreciate that. Again, I know that there's a lot of work that goes into what is being done. And again, I've seen the improvements since I've been in office in 2020, in particular when you took the leadership role of city manager. I feel inclined to name, like on the record, that the vehicle of neighborhood commission being the one that we hop in on under the guise of community engagement is not one that fully captures reaching out and including the voices of all our neighbors. We know the historical composition of that entity has been like very, it's usually the same people, or usually the same people or their friends and stuff like that. And that's not to be dismissive of their very important voluntary role. I think they're all serving with the best intentions, but it's also like putting all of that kind of responsibility in that one vehicle. I think that's something to explore in the future. What else did you say? You said, sorry guys, I'm very tired. Oh, the dream sessions. Yeah, again, I appreciate it. I think equity is a process and we're making strides, but even with those, attendance has fluctuated, and again, that's no shade towards anybody. It's a process. Securing the trust of our neighbors and like rooted in healing of their very real past grievances and trauma our neighbors have experienced or perceive is a process. So I just really encourage us to like, like build on that.
Yeah.
And I'll do my part in being more intentional and amplifying those dream sessions to secure more feedback. But it's a hard ask, right? Because, it's a hard ask asking people to trust fall back on us when they have felt that their needs are not being heard.
And I acknowledge that, and, we are working on trying to really open dialogue with folks. The other thing I know that was addressed or that was brought up is in regard to the shortfall, and that is something that we monitor constantly. I mean, this isn't something that we're bringing up to council tonight and just saying, hey, this is what's going on. We have been monitoring throughout the budget process. We monitor all the time, and we adjust accordingly. Our staff has cut back. We found savings and things like that we didn't make expenditures for things that we, needed to buy, like equipment and things like that. So we've done a managed hiring program to make sure that we're not filling positions that we can hold off on. So we are managing the budget with all due diligence to make sure that we are balancing and not spending more money than we're bringing in. In regard to staff increases, so I think there was something that was said, maybe it was misunderstood. There's not $1.3 million in the budget for home buyer incentive. There's $50,000 and it's one-time monies, and that's to get more people that live or that work for the city to actually live in the city, because we want them to be more invested in their community that they serve, and bring their tax dollars back to invest into our community. So it's $50,000, it's one time. And as far as the staff increases, that's really, if we want to be an employer of choice and we also want to recruit jobs into our community, we have to set the example. We can't ask employers to come in and pay sustainable wages for our residents if we ourselves don't do the same thing. And Ms. Capoletta's right. The general fund is heavy, intensive personnel. It's all people services that are needed to provide, and the police and fire are a big part of the budget. They are most of it. And so, and so that was the $1.3 million that I think that was referenced, because that is just for public safety salaries as part of their meet and confer agreement. The other $2 million goes for all staff salaries across all funds, not meet and confer, not police and fire. So I hope I addressed the concerns and the things that came up. Doesn't mean we're going to get agreement on them, but it's just at least we are managing the budget very, very diligently.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for naming the some of these things that you're trying to fund as like the rationale. So like I'm willing to support things like the home buyers assistance and so on and so forth as an investment, especially if it's going to mean that our staff that responds to a lot of the grievances that we bring and the concerns from our neighbors, like that they are like here. I just wanted to name, like, I think that at least for me, the expectation is that we continue to build on the progress and move towards participatory budget eventually. And it's just important for me to name that, but I appreciate your feedback.
And while this presentation may have seemed brief to our audience at home that are watching this recording later, we did have our budget policy workshop in February. We had the workshop in June, which had a lot of detail. We've had a workshop again, and of course at our last meeting, there was a lot of detail explaining additional positions, why they were needed, and I know that was 5% of what the requests are, I'm guessing at that. And so there's a lot more information and discussions that we have had with you, and so it's out there. I wish to thank you and all of the staff. I know this was tough, and it was tough on top of this year, where we ended up shorter than what we had anticipated. And I just appreciate all the hard decisions that were made before this got to us even.
Thank you, Mayor, and Mr. Locke, and Ms. Patek, Mr. Garcia, CMO team, as well as all of our directors. They have really, really done a great job at answering the call. You know, this is the first time that they really didn't come in and ask us to fund additional things. Instead, they started to get into a competition of how much money they were giving us back. And so they were looking for ways to cut and ways that they could give money back. They knew that we had an identified target, and they said, okay, well, this is what we can do and everything. Yeah. So I really, really want to commend them for understanding and knowing we can't live beyond our means, and they're willing to give back the money that we can and do what we can to make the budget be better.
And without a huge reduction in services.
Correct.
But at some point, some of that they had to give up this year are things that we need, and we'll need to find that in this FY '25 and in the future. But yes, I appreciate everyone who worked so hard on all of this. Any other questions, comments? Then I believe we are ready to vote on item 19, the budget. All right. And now we are on to item 20.
Okay, let me clear this real quick, Marius. To receive a staff presentation and hold a public hearing to receive comments for or against ordinance 2024-41, setting the tax rate for the 2024 tax year at 60.30 cents on each $100 of taxable value of real property that is not exempt from taxation, levying taxes for the use and support of the municipal government of the city for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2024, and ending September 30, 2025, providing a sinking fund for the retirement of the bonded debit of the city, including procedural provisions, and providing an effective date to consider approval of ordinance 2024-41 on the first of two readings.
Okay, I've got something I need to say at the end of the public hearing. Presentation.
There are 4 different tax rates that come into play when setting the tax rate for the upcoming fiscal year. The first is the no new revenue rate, and that's the tax rate that will produce the same amount of revenue as the previous fiscal year, or that would be fiscal year 24, on properties taxed in both years, and that's fiscal year 24 and fiscal year 25. That rate is 59.96. The proposed budget rate is 60.3, and that's the tax rate that was used to prepare the budget. The current rate is the same. We're proposing the same tax rate, the 60.3, and the voter approval rate, and that's 70.36. And the voter approval rate is a tax rate. It increases the operation component of the no new revenue rate. There's the operation and debt component. So it increases the operation component by 3.5%. Then you add the debt rate onto it and any unused increment from the prior 3 years. And unused increment is the difference between the tax rate City Council sets and the voter approval rate. And the important thing about this rate is that if we exceed it, it triggers an automatic election. This provides the tax rate that we just went over, as well as the property tax revenue that the city would receive. Bring your attention to what has a blue box around it. That's the proposed budget and recommended maximum city rate. That box could also pick up the current rate because it is the same rate, the 60.3 cents. The City Council at the last City Council meeting set the maximum proposed rate at 60.3 cents. So the rate that City Council ultimately sets has to be equal to or less than that tax rate. If Council were to adopt a rate, the no new revenue rate, that would be a reduction of $293,000 in revenue. And, prior to setting that ceiling, had we gone all the way up to the voter approval rate of 70.36 cents, that could have generated an additional $8.6 million of revenue. Just mentioned the two different components of the property tax rate, the operations and debt. This component shows the breakout of those two, or I'm sorry, this slide shows the breakout of those two components. And it just compares fiscal year 24 amount to fiscal year 25. So in fiscal year 25, the operations component is 45 cents. The debt is 15.3 for the total of that 60.3. And you can see that there's very little change between 24 and 25. This shows the impact to the homestead annual tax levy for a homestead who had an average assessed value in fiscal year 24 of $338,000 to that same homestead who's now has an average assessed value of $365,000. When you subtract the homestead exemption that City Council approved, that of $15,000, that arrives at the taxable value of that property. So the difference between the taxable value is $27,000. The tax rate in both years, last year and this year, are the same, the 60.3 cents. So, and when you divide the total taxable value by 100 and multiply it by the tax rate, it gives you the annual tax levy. And so for fiscal year 24, it was just under $1,950, and 25, just over $2,100. So the difference annually is $164. And breaking that down as a monthly cost, it would be $14. At the very bottom of that slide, it shows the annual savings that a homestead receives from the homestead exemption that council passed, and that's $90. This slide, notice when, after we had submitted this, that the legend that was not included on the slide. So the gray part is the actual count. It's the number of homestead exemptions that the city has. So it shows from 20 to 25, just the number of homesteads. You can see the growth. The average from year to year across this time period is 800. You can see from fiscal year 24 to 25, that number jumped from 6,700 to 8,200. So it jumped about 1,500 homesteads, and that's just more people calling San Marcos home and receiving this homestead exemption. The blue shows the value or the property tax relief that City Council has provided with the homestead tax exemptions. The most recent change became effective in fiscal year 2023, and that's when the over 65 years of age and the disabled was increased from 25 to 35,000, and a new homestead exemption was created, a general homestead of 15,000. So the over 65 and the disabled get the 35 and the 15 for a total of 50. You can see the impact that had for the homestead. The total savings went from $300,000 to $1 million. So that was a $700,000 of savings, which is also $700,000 of less revenue that the city brought in to provide those savings. In fiscal year 25, that amount is now $1.3 million. So since those changes have taken place, the total amount of tax relief provided by those changes has grown by $1 million. This slide just illustrates the impact that the sales tax for property tax relief has for residents. The city's total sales tax is 1.5%, and the property tax relief is a third of that, or 0.5%. If you look at the first column that says current with the sales tax, it shows the same average assessed value of $365,000 that we saw on the previous slide, and it compares it to if we didn't have this in place, which is the without the sales tax. So if you have, once you reduce the homestead exemption to arrive at the taxable value, the total annual levy is the same for current with sales tax, that's the prior slide, at the $2,100. In order to generate this same amount of revenue, our property tax would have to be 14.45 cents higher than what it is right now. So the annual tax levy for that average homestead would be $2,600, which is an increase of $500 a year, or $42 a month, if you're looking at it from a monthly perspective. The good thing, another good thing about the sales tax or property tax relief is that not all sales tax is generated by residents. When you think of the outlet malls and the tourism that, you know, people come from outside the city to shop at those outlet malls, that's reducing the tax burden on residents. And that brings us to the next steps. At the conclusion of the public hearing, City Council must announce that the vote on the tax rate will occur on September 17th at 6 o'clock here at the City Hall. And in terms of next steps from there, we'll hold a second public hearing on the budget and tax rate, hold a public hearing on the fiscal year 2025 fee schedule, next City Council meeting, and also vote to adopt the fiscal year 25 budget, ratify the property tax revenue increase, and set the tax rate. And that concludes the presentation.
Okay, I will open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone in chambers or the lobby who wishes to speak on item 20 regarding us setting the tax rate. If not, I believe we have someone online joining us. Ms. Capoletta?
Whoops, can y'all see me? I'm sorry, give me a second, would you? The
We can
views
see
were
and
all-
hear you.
Oh, you can? Okay,
Yes.
give me 1 second. Hey, y'all, good evening. My name is Professor Lisa Marie Capoletta. They call me LMC. Did he say $14 a month? He was going so fast, and then I heard $42 a month, and that's a lot. That's a lot for different income levels. So for one person, $42 may mean 3 cents. For someone else, $42 means $500 a month. Additionally, the $1.3 million, I was going so fast, I said $1.3 million and the home buyer's assistance, not for the home buyer's assistance. Now, for the cost of living adjustment, I will agree to the 3% the 5% for civil service. I'm totally down with that. Cops, fire, EMS, let's do it. Let's give them 10% increase. But for non-civil servants, $2 million, I'm sorry. Especially when right now you guys have not named the amount, like I just asked you again because he went so fast, how much over budget are we right now? Additionally, yes, we had workshops, but how many people attended? And why are those workshops not, or maybe they are during meetings like right now. Maybe they are at 6 o'clock on a Tuesday. The language is highly specialized and it's not broken down. And the fact that the budget was out less than a month, the working poor are already struggling to make ends meet. It's not enough time for people to sift through it. You guys gave a promise. Last year, there was a whole discussion that you would keep the budget under control, and you know you made that promise, and that promise has been broken. And I'm not understanding why you guys can't discuss why you are over budget. Monitoring the budget does not solve for the fact that you are over budget. And you're asking us to pay for an increase of 3% for non-civil servant people when we're not getting the 3% increase. They're lucky they've got jobs up there. I think that you guys are really disconnected and out of touch because I made these very same arguments last year, and we talked about the equity officer last year, and quite frankly, I think you have tied her hands. I think it's by design. I shouldn't have to repeat myself time and time again, year after year, public hearing after public hearing, with this exact same argument and all other concerns that I have. She knows that this is inequitable in terms of the language, and she knows that these people can't afford the increases. And you guys know that the Neighborhood Commission is not doing any outreach. I haven't heard anything, and you guys are not empowering them to do that. And quite frankly, you and I know it goes over a lot of people's heads. So what is the messaging? I think that this is an utter failure, and I think that you guys are it's broken promises. Thank you for your time, and God bless San Marcos.
I will close the public hearing and make this statement. The City Council will consider a vote on approval of the tax rate by ordinance on first reading tonight on September 17th of 2024 at 6 p.m. at San Marcos City Hall. The City Council will consider a final vote on approval of the tax rate by ordinance on second reading. And at this point, I'm seeking a motion on the tax rate.
Motion to approve. Second.
Motion by Mr. Gleason, seconded by Mr. Prather to approve this item, which is tax rate at the same as it was last year. Are there any questions, statements? Ms. Reyes, are we over budget?
No, ma'am, we cut expenses. So we projected that the sales tax were going to come in higher, that the revenues were going to come in higher, so we were not, and once we saw that the sales tax were not coming in as projected, then we cut expenses. So no, we are not over budget.
Thank you. Council, questions, comments, thoughts? We've adopted the budget. This is the tax rate that it takes to support that budget. So, all right, we're ready to vote? Buttons are flashing.
Okay, the motion passes 7-0.
All right, moving on to item 21, and then after that, we'll probably take a break.
Receive staff presentation, hold a public hearing to receive comments for or against ordinance 2024-42, amending the rates for electric utility services in accordance with section 86.177 of the San Marcos Code of Ordinances, including procedural provisions, and declare an effective date, and consider approval of ordinance 2024-42 on the first of two readings.
Okay, presentation?
Thank you. This is provides some background information for the public hearing on the proposed electric rate adjustment. Looking at these charts, the chart on the left shows the total revenues for fiscal year 25 is just over $81 million. The bulk of that, as you can see, 92% comes from the electric utility bills, which is the user charges that people pay for the use of the electric. On the right-hand side are the total expenses, which are $79.8 million. 78% of that amount are operating expenses. That's the blue color. Personnel make up 12% of the total. The orange is debt service. It makes up 9%. And then you have 1% for one-time capital type expenses. On July 25th, the Citizens Utility Advisory Board voted to recommend a 5.5% effective rate adjustment for electric rates. And we wanted to show this slide that in September of 2022, the city's electric utility rating was downgraded from an A- to a BBB+. And as we've discussed at the last city council workshop, this bond rating has a direct impact on the interest that the city would pay if we use the electric rating to issue electric revenue bonds. One of the items that the rating analyst included in the report was that utilities operating in the ERCOT environment need greater liquidity than others given the volatility that is perceived to be in the ERCOT market. We're estimating that the total fund balance within the electric fund will need to be in the 150 to 180 day range. This next slide provides a look at what fiscal year 25 will look like. Again, the total revenues at 81 million, total expenses at 79 million, and that we would end with a fund balance of 24.9 million. That's with that 5.5% effective rate adjustment. The legal minimum required debt service coverage ratio of 1.2 would be met. With that 5.5, you could see that we would finish at 1.21, and we would have 113 days of cash on hand, which does meet our current fund balance policy, given the way that the rating analysts are looking at the electric fund, where we need to grow that. And so you can see over the next 4 years what it would take for us to get up to around 155 days of days cash on hand, as well as looking at the debt service coverage ratio. The 1.2 is the legal minimum. As we discussed at the prior workshop, 1.4, 1.5 is considered healthy, and anything over 1.5 is considered strong. With these proposed increases, by the time you get to 2029, we'd be at 1.4. But for fiscal year '25, the proposed 5.5 does get us to the 1.2. This next slide just shows the 5-year target. We would like to get the electric utility rating back up to back to a AA, which is the same that the general fund and the water wastewater fund is at currently. The next slide provides a rate comparison. It shows where we currently are in blue, second from the bottom, and where we will be with the proposed increase. And this is for a residential electric payer, which is it doesn't move us up position-wise, but you can see the impact of where we are compared to some of our peers. The next slide has the same information for commercial customers, and you can see we have the lowest rate currently and would still have the lowest rate after the proposed adjustment. This slide provides the electric utility rate history adjustments. What is boxed are when there was either an increase or a proposed increase. And there's a note at the bottom that there's been no rate increases in 7 of the last 9 years in the electric utility fund. Some of the big expense changes in the electric fund. The 3% increase for electric is $330,000. There's one new position being added. This position will actually be split between electric and water wastewater at a cost of $153,000. There are 4 large equipment replacements, and you listed there are the equipments that are being replaced. You see a bucket truck, gas monitors and test stand, forklift, and heavy-duty lift at $612,000, and a new debt service for the capital improvement program, that projects that will go into play this year. That debt service will come online next year, and that is at $441,000. At the last budget workshop, we shared this slide showing what the electric rate options are. What is the Citizens Utility Advisory Board and staff recommends is the 5.5% effective rate increase. That will get us to that 1.2 debt service coverage ratio. There to the right are just other adjustments and where it would get us. We mentioned earlier that a healthy debt service coverage ratio is considered to be in the 1.4 and 1.5, and anything over 1.5 is strong. So if council wanted to adjust to get us closer to that 1.4, listed there are the rate adjustments that it would take to do so, as well as what the impact would be on the typical residential ratepayer. And that concludes the presentation.
Okay, I will open the public hearing on the electric rate change. Anyone in chambers or in the lobby wishing to speak on this, step up to the podium. Seeing none, I believe we have someone online who is going to speak to us. Ms. Capoletta.
Hey y'all, my name is Professor Lisa Marie Capoletta. I live at 1322 Belvin, and they call me LMC. A few sentences before he said 65% of the total budget is personnel, he used the word gap, and it was used with the word millions. What was that? If he could email me, I mean, for now on, I'm just going to take my phone and I'm just going to record the entire meeting, right? Because I told you, I'm like doing double duty, right? I'm working and I'm listening, but my jaw dropped. And then he said, and then to me, if you guys are making adjustments, that means there was a gap. That means that y'all are not overseeing the expenses. Additionally, it's nothing for some of you to have a little bit of extra, right? $42 or $450. For some people, that's a lot, and you're not denying that your constituents, the taxpayers, have not been involved. You're not denying that the Neighborhood Commission has not reached out and that the city is not giving them tools to reach out. And you're not denying that this is highly specialized technical information, and most importantly, it's within under 30 days, and I'm the only one here, just like I'm the only one here. Probably the last person that was this involved, and Jane, you know him, is Bill Coddington, God rest his soul, who taught me how to do this. And so you guys need to ask yourself a question, why? You go out and you campaign during election season. You know, we have an equity officer who's been here, and I've brought this up repeatedly. She's more concerned about getting directives from this city management team for affordable housing and city staff funded initiatives, which will ultimately gentrify this community. We were sold a good of promises that those student-built purpose high rises would lower our property taxes. Instead, they have spiked, and we're paying for the infrastructure, which is my concern about all these other developments, just like one that's on your docket for later on tonight. Ultimately, we're paying for the ecological and the human health impacts, not to mention our pocketbook. There's been no conversation about the promises you guys made, and I want to remind you from a piece of scripture from Ecclesiastes. I could miss Ecclesiastes. Well, I can't say Australia or breakfast either. It is better not to promise anything than to promise something and not do it. Don't let your words cause you sin, and don't say to the priest of the temple, I didn't mean what I promised. If you do, God will become angry with your words and will destroy everything you have worked for. Many useless promises are like so many dreams. They mean nothing. You should respect God. Thank you for your time, and God bless San Marcos.
I will close the public hearing and await a motion on item 21, rates for the electric utility.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Gleason, seconded by Mr. Prather to approve. Mr. Gary, I'm going to go back to one thing real quick and say that the increase in taxes was $14 a month, not 42, just for that clarification. I missed doing that a minute ago. Any clarifications we need on any of that, Ms. Reyes?
Just what he was referring to in terms of a gap is council approves a budget at the very beginning of the year. It's based on forecasted revenues that we anticipate that we will receive throughout the year. Things just much like our own budget at home. We don't necessarily, if you project you're going to get more overtime, or you project you're going to have some things and then circumstances change and you don't actually get that money, so then you have to draw back and contain your expenses, cut some expenses that you would normally spend. So what he was referring to is that we projected to get about $3.4 million more in sales tax revenue throughout this fiscal year. We did not get the $3.4 million that we had anticipated, so that means we had to cut that same number or same amount of expenses so that our budget would be balanced, and we would not have to dip into our savings account, and we would not have to overspend our budget. So that's what he was referring to when he said gap. It was from the originally adopted budget to throughout the budget and sales tax not coming in as anticipated, but we, like I said, we regrouped and we made sure that we cut the expenses so that we weren't spending more than we were bringing in.
Okay. Anything else on electric?
just have a comment. I feel like a broken record. I just wanted to name that I appreciate the significant strides city leadership has made in reassessing utility assistance programs, as explained earlier today in the work sessions. But similar to my past votes, I cannot in good conscience vote for rate increases at this time. My primary concern remains ensuring that these assistance programs are being deployed intentionally and equitably to reach our neighbors most in need until I see this commitment fully realized. I cannot support the increase, but I do look forward to being able to confidently vote for this next year once we've had time to assess and redirect the resources to support, to make sure that the support is being managed more equitably. Again, I know your job is presenting what you interpret as a need to keep business going, and I appreciate it and all the explanations, but it's my responsibility to voice the concerns I hear from my constituents, so I hope you understand. That's where I'm coming from, and that's all I have to say about that.
Okay, and just a note, that the electric utility is a self-contained, that, what we bring in is what we have to spend on electric utility tasks and expenses, and this doesn't intermingle with with the general fund and property tax. Just a reminder to everyone. And for those of you who might be interested, we had a pretty robust discussion about utility assistance, as Ms. Garza just noted, in our work session today. It was item 3. So if you're watching this and wondering, gee, do they do anything to help people? Please go watch that one and jump to item 3 on that. And you will see that we've initiated a discussion, and there's a lot that we're doing, and we're looking to see what else we can do to assist people. So I guess we're ready to vote.
The motion passes 6-1.
Okay, on to our break that we normally take every 90 minutes. It is 7:36. Let's take 5 minutes and be back at 7:41 by that clock, which is a little. It's 7:44, and we are on item 23.
22, Mayor?
22, you're right. You know how I am. I'm just always trying to move the meeting along. When I skip something, it's just, you're right, 22.
Yes, ma'am. Receive a staff presentation, hold a public hearing to receive comments for or against ordinance 2024-43, amending rates for the water, wholesale water, reclaimed water, and wastewater treatment utility services in accordance with Section 86 of the San Marcos City Code of Ordinances, including procedural provisions, and declare an effective date, and consider approval of ordinance 2024-43 on the first of 2 readings.
Presentation.
Thank you again, Mayor and City Council. To begin with, for some background information, this is an overview of the fiscal year 2025 budget and the Water Wastewater Utility Fund. On the left-hand side are the total revenues, and those are estimated to be $69.4 million. The bulk of that, as you can see, 98%, are the user rates that customers pay through their utility bill. On the right-hand side are the estimated expenses at 67.4%. When you break those down to the different major categories, 64% of that total budget is our operating expenses, 22% is debt service, 13% is personnel, and 1% are one-time expenses. On July 25th, 2024, at the City Citizens Utility Advisory Board meeting, the board voted to recommend a 5% increase for water and a 5% increase for wastewater. This is a recent result from a wastewater utility bond rating where the city was upgraded. In July of 23, we were upgraded from a AA- to a AA. And just a couple of the notes that was included in the rating report. One was the city's willingness to examine rates on an annual basis. And 2 is that the city had a strong fund balance. And at the time, it was around 120 days. This next slide provides Similar information to what we just saw for the fiscal year 2025 proposed budget. You have the beginning fund balance of $23.4 million, the revenues of $69 million, expenses of $66 million, for an ending fund balance of $26 million. With that 5% adjustment for both water and wastewater, we would finish with days of cash on hand of 142 days, and our legal minimum required debt service coverage ratio would be 1.2, which is the legal minimum that we can have it due to bond covenants. From fiscal year 2026 out, it shows the different rates that we would have to set or change in order to maintain either that minimum 1.2 or to increase it to get up to that 1.4, which, as we've discussed, when you get in that 1.4 to 1.5 range, that's considered a healthy debt service coverage range. This next slide provides a rate comparison to the city's peer cities for the average residential customer that uses around 5,000 gallons a year. You can see currently San Marcos is about 5 from the bottom. After the rate change, we would just move up 1 ahead of Seguin. And the next slide has a similar comparison, only for a commercial user using 50,000 gallons. You can see that the city of San Marcos is currently about 4 or 5 from the top, and after the proposed rate adjustment would be at the top for the commercial user. This slide shows the water wastewater utility rate history. What's outlined there is the 1 year that there hasn't been a rate adjustment in the water wastewater utility fund. The major expense changes in the water wastewater utility fund, the 3% increase in personnel is $291,000 for water wastewater. The major cost drivers in operating, the Alliance Regional Water Authority contract will increase by $250,000. The surface water treatment plant contract will increase by $280,000. And the wastewater treatment plant contract will increase by $357,000. There's also some large equipment being proposed to be replaced, as well as infrastructure upgrades at a cost of just under $890,000. And the debt service that will come online next fiscal year for the fiscal year 2024 capital improvement program is $565,000. Similar to the electric fund, these are the water and wastewater service rate options. The Citizen Utility Advisory Board and staff recommend the 5% increase for water and the 5% increase for wastewater. That will meet the legal minimum of 1.2 debt service coverage ratio. Also shown there is if we went higher to get to a 1.3 or even to a 1.4, it shows the rate change that would be needed and what the impact would be for the typical residential ratepayer. And that concludes the presentation.
Okay, I will open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone in chambers or in the foyer wishing to speak on this item. If so, please step up to the podium. Seeing none, we will go to Ms. Capoletta, who joins us online.
Hey, whoops, let me get my camera on. Hey, y'all, good evening. My name is Professor Lisa Marie Capoletta. I live at 1322 Belvin. They call me LMC. I would just kindly ask you guys to stop projecting If I'm hearing, I heard the word, I've heard different numbers, and I know I've stated them correctly, and then I will not complete a thought, and then that's the thought that somebody latches on to. $3.4 million we didn't get. That's because the economy is crashing. You guys know it, and there's inflation predicted, and this is something I've been talking about for a long time. I'm not understanding why we're not shifting our priorities in this community to the nuts and bolts, and why you are not acknowledging your positionalities of privilege and also those of city staff when you're rendering out this decision. Not everybody gets overtime to make a budget. Most of us are locked into a specific amount. Many of us have lost our jobs. And yet the city is still balancing, whether it's water rates, like the topic of this conversation, or the other public hearings that we've gone on the backs of people who are not getting these increases. Meanwhile, they are giving themselves increase. I don't think these boards are thinking critically. They're not asking the questions, and that's why you appoint them. That's why I'll never get on a board, because I think outside of the box. I have broccoli, y'all. I just ate some broccoli, excuse me. So if it pops out on the screen, it wasn't on purpose. They're not thinking critically. That's why you guys will never put me on a board, because I read the packet. I filed the open records request because there's not transparency. And they're not asking the questions. Boards at the city level can sometimes be used as tools of oppression. Those in power may stack these boards and individuals who share their bias, leading to decisions that marginalize certain groups like La Raza in this community. And you are the last boundary. You are the ones who are supposed to say no. And if you guys kept turning these increases down year after year after year, you would reorient the bias of these boards, and you would reorient the bias of city staff. They would know when they put this stuff on the docket that you would not approve it, just like in Wimberley. Right? They know, don't even dare to do that. When the economy crashes, what are you guys going to do then about the gap? Because as far as I can see, there are no provisions right now. By controlling these boards, those in power can enact policies and decisions, and in this case, increase races to perpetuate systematic oppression and hinder the progress of marginalized groups. Once again, where is your equity officer? Where is the conversation about people who are struggling to pay these increased rates? Year after year, you guys say we're going to increase the rates, so over time, the rates will decrease. And I've been at those public hearings repeatedly, and that has not been the case. We've been counting on the elected officials, and you've disappointed a lot of us, quite frankly, in this community. Thank you for your time, and God bless San Marcos.
I will close the public hearing, and I await a motion on item 22.
Motion to approve. Second.
Motion by Mr. Prather, seconded by Mr. Gleason, to approve the change in rates for water and wastewater. Any comments?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr.
I have a
Medill?
question. Thank you, Mayor. I know I brought this up during the QVAD meeting that I was part of. It's been sticking to me since I came on council of these contracts increasing every year. Is there any idea, why do we need these contracts? Do we not have employees that can eventually do these kinds of works? I'm just wondering why we keep contracting out for a lot of money.
You mean like consulting type things?
The
or
authority
tasks?
contract, the Alliance, Regional Water Authority, the surface water treatment plant contract, the wastewater treatment plant contract. Do we not have employees that could eventually be trained to do this, or why do we keep getting the contracts?
Okay. This is the City Manager, Joe Pantalian. So really, it's the nature of the contract. So some of those contracts are infrastructure and CIP related in nature, and others are management in nature. So as you see, like on some of the management contracts where there are increases in supplies, chemicals, employee costs, that's where you see the 2 or 3% increasing. And then on some of the CIP-oriented ones, it's really just a matter of the schedule of CIP costs that are coming along. And I see our Director of Utilities, Tyler Yorth here, that can add some detail if you'd like.
Sure, okay, thank you.
The contracts, particularly for the surface water plant and the wastewater treatment plant, both have provisions for cost of CPI, Consumer Price Index increases. So they're affected by inflation up to a maximum of 5% in any given year. And so what you see there is particularly these last couple of years with inflation being what it is, they're hitting toward that max amount. And of course, the contracts are so big that when you then look at the numbers, you see the increases in $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, at a pop. And it's just because that's what it costs us to run those plants.
Is there any path to us having San Marcos City employees doing the work these contractors do?
So on the wastewater treatment plant, we're at the end of a 20-year contract. It was a 10-year contract with 2 5-year extension. We are out of extensions, and so we Sunday morning released the RFP to go back out and do that. And a provision in that contract, because we're not ready to take that on today, there is a provision in that contract, though, that we can evaluate that in a couple of years, see where the city is, and have an exit strategy that would allow us then to morph that into a city-run plant. When that plant was built back in the 90s, it actually was ran and operated by city staff. Early 2000s, for a couple of reasons, it was decided to go out for contract. We pulled those staff back out, brought the contractors in. That's where we are today. So as we evaluate that through the next several months, we'll be bringing you back our recommendation for awarding that contract in another 4, 5, 6 months. And then, but we specifically put provision in there for our ability to staff it later on.
Thank you, sir. I didn't know about that. That's very informative. Thank you. I didn't know there was a 20-year contract either, so that's very informative for me. Thank you, sir.
Good.
And Alliance Water, that's us with other entities. So that's not something we would, it's not ours alone. Yeah.
Mayor, I have a question. On that contract, why do we have to wait until the last minute to go out and start this process? Couldn't we started it 6 months ago to have those answers now?
When does the contract expire?
Contract expires middle of next year, fall of next year.
Okay, then we're
ahead.
We're ahead.
So we're doing that now. It allows us some transition time.
Yes, sir.
We want to be able to get the contract to you, 6, 8, 9 months ahead of time, and let us get everything in place. And then on the chance, because this is a competitive process, there may be a new contractor, new supplier selected, so we need some additional transition time there. So we've built all that into the schedule that we worked in with procurement back in January, February timeframe when we first started creating the terms of the RFP. So we've got all those things that we've considered.
Well, I stand corrected. Thank you. I just know there was one contract a few years back that we waited until the last minute. It wasn't this one. It was another.
We are miles ahead of this one.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
And Mayor, I have a question too. So
Yeah, go ahead.
you said the surface water and wastewater treatments are both locked into CPI and at a 5% max? Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Trevino, let's vote.
Okay, the motion passes 6-1.
On to, now we're on item 23.
Receive a staff presentation, hold a public hearing to receive comments for or against ordinance 2024-44, amending the rates for residential and multifamily customers of solid waste programs known as resource recovery in accordance with section 66.028 of the San Marcos Code of Ordinances, including procedural provisions, and declare an effective date, and consider approval of ordinance 2024-44 on the first of 2 readings.
Okay, I'm sorry. Presentation.
Thank you. One last time, Mayor and City Council, this is the last public hearing of this evening. For some background information of the Resource Recovery Fund for fiscal year 25, total revenues are proposed at $8.2 million. Of that amount, the majority, 68%, come from the garbage collection fee. 28% come from the recycling collection fee, and then 4% are the other miscellaneous revenues. On the expense side, 90% of the $7.9 million proposed expenses are operating expenses, and 10% are personnel. The largest expense in the fund is for the refuse collector, and that's about $5.2 million. This is an overview of the Resource Recovery Fund. If you look at fiscal year 2025, it'll begin with just under a $3 million fund balance. The proposed revenues are $8.2 million, proposed expenses $7.9 million. So we'll end with a fund balance of $3.3 million, or 150 days of cash on hand. This is a fund that we're trying to generate fund balance to help fund the new resource recovery site. The growth in revenues are coming from two different sources. One is an increase from a 1% rate adjustment, and the other is $1 being added for the mattress removal program. The 1% increase is for an incremental approach that is preventing a larger increase in future years. Looking at the major expense changes, the 3% increase in the Resource Recovery Fund for personnel is $29,000. The major operating cost drivers is the solid waste residential contract that will increase by $250,000, and the recycling services contract that will increase by $451,000. $411,000 of that amount is for implementation of the mattress removal program. This slide provides a history of the resource recovery rate adjustment. As you can see, each year, except for fiscal year 16, there was a recommended rate adjustment or an approved rate adjustment. And that concludes the presentation.
Okay, I'll open the public hearing. Anyone in chambers in the foyer wishing to speak on this item? Seeing no one coming to the podium, we'll go to Ms. Capoletta. Is she still online? Ms. Capoletta.
I am. If you could hang tight. When I watch the presentations, I have you guys pinned so I could see the slides. Give me 1 sec to move it back to Windows. Here, give me 1 sec. I apologize. Hi, good evening. My name is Professor Lisa Marie Capoletta. I live at 1322 Belvin, and they call me LMC. Saul, you nailed it. It was back in the day when Bert was there. Remember, it was like we almost didn't get trash service. And I think Matthew actually has a good point. I remember back in the day when city workers actually made the roads. Right? Jane, you remember that. And now it's all contractors. And your presenter, he nails it. The guy who came up about the gentleman who came up about resource recovery, I'm sorry, I worked from 7 a.m., 0700 to like 11 p.m. last night, been going all day to pay my property taxes. But that gentleman had it, he was absolutely right. It's the material costs are increasing, and this is due to the economy. And the problem is the city's not making those adjustments. You guys are doing it on the fly. And Stephanie, I appreciate you explaining why there was a gap, and I may not agree with the analogy that you used, right? Because you guys should know this. You guys have this smart cat who works for the city, right? This gentleman works for the city, and he's watching the economy. And you guys know that everything has gone up. Everything, right? So material costs are going up, and the city is running itself, and you guys are allowing it, quite frankly, like it's a booming economy. It's not a booming economy, and the economy is going to crash, and you guys have no provisions. Do you have food stockpiled in case something happens? Right? Do you have some way to help the citizens if suddenly something happens and they can't pay the golden calf, which is our utility rates, which you guys praise whenever it gets hot? Right? And the elderly TIAs are paying for that. You guys are not thinking outside the box, and quite frankly, you're not being realistic about the global economy, what's happening in this great nation. He talked about inflation, and that's the leadership paradigm that y'all, quite frankly, are enabling. You could be denying this stuff time and again, and it would correct itself through the leadership process, but you are enabling it, is what you're doing. And I just feel like it's time, you guys are cutting the Easter Seals program is what one citizen has been telling me, so you don't have to cut the easement, right? But yet, meanwhile, we have all these other lavish programs that just seem to carry on. And that's kind of odd, right? Like the citizens have to cut their yard, but yet we're cutting like these little things, which, I think employ some people. I don't have all the details, so feel free to call me out, because you're going to call me out when I mumble a word, but you won't actually call out the actual number that I give. Once again, I think it's sad that I'm the only one here tonight, and I think that is reflective of lack of outreach on your part as elected officials, your positionality of privilege, of not being empathetic to the La Raza, especially in this community. Thank you for your time, and God bless Sam.
I will close the public hearing and await a motion on item 23.
Motion to approve. Second.
Motion to approve by Mr. Gleason, seconded by Mr. Prather. Council, are there any discussions on the resource recovery
Yes, Mayor,
items?
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
And I'm not sure which staff member might be able to answer this, Mr. Locke probably. On the solid waste residential contract and the recycling service contract, are either one of those tied to CPI?
There is an automatic increase built into the refuse collector contract, yes. It is, I don't know offhand what that is. I would need to follow up, and I don't believe that Mr. Carr is here this evening to be able to address that question either. But there is an automatic increase built in. I'm not sure that's tied to CPI necessarily, but there is a %.
I actually like it being tied to CPI, even though it's not completely accurate. It gives you a better idea of overall cost overruns and expenses going up, and it gives you a little more of a true feeling of ups and downs and the ebbs and flows of it, right, instead of a little bit of a guesswork. And then, Mayor, after this, I have one other comment too, but I'm going to let everybody else weigh in on the resource recovery. Nothing?
Continue.
Okay, all right. All right, well, this is the 5th vote we're making to basically raise increases on some sort of rates on the citizens of our community. I don't take these lightly, and these impact me directly, all of us. And, these are tough decisions to make. And as far as the 3% increase of personnel costs, inflation hits every aspect of society, and including our employees. And our employees are the biggest cost run of our budget, and they're also our best asset. And we have seen the increase in retention, and the satisfaction rate has gone up on the surveys, and we have seen that. And I am more than happy to invest in our employees to get the best what we can. Inflation hurts everything. It is, people really are just finally realizing how bad things are. And thank God we're not at the rates that we were in the 80s, or we would see some real problems. But I just want everybody to know I don't take these lightly. This impacts everybody, especially people on fixed incomes and lower middle incomes. But the overall viability and stability of these funds is critical. And if we don't keep up our bond ratings and keep up these funds in a stable position, it will only cost the taxpayers more money in the long run. And so I want to thank all the staff members for putting time and effort into this. To the QAB members, I know they don't take this lightly. That board is extremely important, and they really get into some technical aspects of things. And I wish we did have more input, Ms. Copoletta. And it's one of those things that is hard to digest and understand, and it might be a little bit of outreach on us, but it's just complicated. But I just want the community to know that none of us take this lightly, and the decisions I make for these increases are for the stability and for the better financial stability of the city and our employees for the future. So thanks for staff for putting all the work into this, and these are tough decisions. So thanks for your time.
You're right, they're tough decisions, but these are businesses that we're running, and we've got to make sure that those businesses run, because people expect, when they turn on the tap, the water to come out, and they expect their electricity to be up. And as Ms. Reyes said, we want to make sure that our employees are paid fairly, and that we're setting a good example for other employers. So, if I hadn't thanked QAB already, I want to thank QAB now because they look at this more in depth. And they do provide us a lot of information, so that's important. Anybody got anything else?
Just to piggyback on that, I can attest that they spent hours over this issue, debating it, really intelligent conversations that were happening.
Yeah.
And it was a very difficult decision for them to make, and I'm very proud of that board to do the work that they do. So just thank you very much to the QAB board.
That's good. All right, then we will we're voting on item 23, resource recovery.
Mr. Scott?
Shane? Sometimes you gotta hit it 2 or 3 times.
The motion passes 6-1.
All right, and that concludes the public hearing portion of our program. And so we are back to our items that were pulled from the consent agenda, which is 4 and 13. So, Mr. Trevino, if you would read item 4, please.
Consider approval of ordinance 2024-27 on the second of 2 readings, annexing into the city approximately 7.553 acres of land inclusive of a portion of county right-of-way in Caldwell County, Texas, generally located on the western side of FM 1984, approximately 4,600 feet northeast of the intersection between State Highway 80 and FM 1984, and approximately 150 feet northeast of the intersection between FM 1984 and Foster Boulevard, case number AN-24-03, Axis Logistics, including procedural provisions and declare an effective date.
Okay, I'm looking for a motion on this one.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Gleason, seconded by Mr. Prather. I have a question, Mr. Metalli, Ms. Hernandez. It was stated during the public comment that the roadway was not in the city limits and not in the development agreement, another part of it, not the annexation part. Is that accurate?
I may need a little bit of clarification. What they're requesting to be annexed at this time is within the development agreement.
Right, but the rest of the roadway that this is going to continue on to?
To FM 110 is
Yes.
in the city limits and in the development agreement. And maybe we could go
Okay.
about 3 slides forward. There was a graphic in the packet right there that shows the purple, which is within city limits, the yellow, which is being annexed or on the table today for annexation.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Questions, comments? I guess it's time for us to vote. Oops, I hit mine too soon.
Okay. All right, ooh. So the motion fails 3-2 and 3 no's. Mr.
Matthew's
Mendoza is out.
He's in,
He thought he was going to have to go back to work.
he went to the restroom.
Okay.
He went to the restroom.
Okay, well, we'll hang on for a minute, because,
Yeah.
yeah, he told me he might need to go to work this evening.
Just so everybody know, we're down to
So we-
1 inside City Hall right now, so we were all sharing.
Yeah, we've been sharing. Okay. Rock, paper, scissors? Yeah, he'll be back. Yeah, but we are having remodels in the restrooms in the hallway. And I thank Mr. Pentalian for checking into something. When we heard the rain earlier, I heard water running. And he said there's a drain in this wall right back here. So I did hear water running, and it sounded like it was pouring. And it kind of scared me because it sounded like it was in the building. So it's good to know that it was raining in a spot that is intentional for it to go, and it was contained. So anyway, that's why I kept looking over that way. I wasn't looking at you, Mr. Prather. I was looking, is there something in that wall? Did you hear it? Yeah, I was like, we're gonna have like a brain surgery. Yeah. Okay. So, we're gonna vote again so that Mr. Mendoza can join us? On the vote? Okay.
Ready. All right, the motion passes 4-3.
And so now that concludes item 4, correct? Okay, then we will go to item 13, which was also pulled.
Consider approval of Resolution 2024-167R approving an airport facility lease agreement for commercial use for airport property located at 1982 Airport Drive with Compliance Aviation DBA Blue Skies Aviation for an initial 1-year period with options to renew totaling 5 years, also approving a related 14-month lease extension with Compliance Aviation at 1815 Airport Drive to expire at the same date, authorize the city manager or her designee to execute the lease on behalf of the city and declare an effective date.
Motion to postpone, Mayor.
We don't do that, remember? We explained that last
I'm-
time.
I'm doing it on purpose. I
No.
know what I'm doing.
No, I'm not going to accept a motion to postpone. I'm accepting a motion to approve or deny. After we have that on the table, then I will accept a motion to postpone as per Robert's rules.
I think with Roberts, we can move a
No,
motion.
you can't.
Okay. I don't want to negotiate up from the dais. That's what this is about. So I'm not going to support a motion or deny. I want to postpone it and let staff continue to talk to.
Well, then make a motion to
I'll let
approve.
somebody else.
Do something. Okay. Mr. Scott, you pulled this.
Yeah, I did.
I was going to you first.
You want me
We're
to?
trying to. You pulled it.
Yeah, do you want me to
We
talk
need a
about it, or
motion.
you want me to say yes?
We need a motion.
Motion to approve.
Okay. And is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay.
Now make a motion to postpone.
I'll second that.
2 meetings? 2 meetings?
Be first meeting in October?
We can, first meeting in October. So is there any guidance council wants to give us in terms of, I know that what I understand is that staff had worked with Mr. Maycock to come up with the rate today. So if council would like for us to do something different, then we just need to know what that looks like.
I mean, honestly, I would feel more comfortable having this conversation in like another setting. I don't know if that's like, I don't know. I just feel like, I don't know.
Mayor, I got some. I don't think this whole thing was a contentious item. I think it was just a difference in opinion about what the rates are, what has to be charged at the
Mr.
airport.
Scott, right now, the conversation is on motion to postpone.
Right, but
That's the motion that's on the floor.
yeah, I mean, can we
We need
still
to vote
have?
on that.
Oh, my bad, okay.
Right,
That's what
it
you
has to
want.
be
That's what you
germane
want.
to the
Okay.
postponement.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it would be, for example, I want to postpone because I'd like more information. I want to
Right.
Yeah,
postpone
that's-
because
It's got to
we
be
don't-
about the postponement.
Oh, gotcha, okay.
And I was kind of going
That's where I
with
was going with it.
Mr. Scott was, this wasn't being contentious, this is nothing, this is just giving everybody a chance. If there is something else to come up, and if the
Right.
same thing comes back in a month, so be it. But if, I've heard just enough that just giving staff and
Asking them to have another conversation?
one more conversation. Yep, that's all I was doing, so I just wasn't trying to box anybody in or anything here, and,
So, okay.
yeah, that wasn't,
Then,
because it doesn't, because the lease is still good for a couple months, correct? No, yours is
This month, the 27th.
this month.
Is the airport in the negative?
I'm sorry, we can't have conversations from the audience.
Then, if it's up the 27th, one more meeting? Is that gonna, yeah? one
Next
more
meeting, and I know, yes, and
I must have looked at the contract
yeah.
wrong. I thought it had some more.
yeah,
time.
some, and the airport's barely making it, so that is, as far as like making the operations, revenues, expenses, so
Yeah.
that is gonna go into some of the
Okay, yeah.
conversation.
One more meeting? So I changed my postponement to one meeting?
To their
I'm
next
fine with
meeting, got it written down.
Okay.
So we'll now vote on the motion to postpone to the next meeting. Mr. Mendoza? I know, I had to think about it too.
Okay, the motion passes 6-1.
Okay, so this will come back to us on our next agenda. And that concludes items that were pulled from the consent agenda. Correct?
So just so we're clear, the next move there is we are having the conversation in the next meeting?
No, staff's gonna have the conversation.
They're
It's
gonna-
come back on our agenda at the next meeting,
Oh, gotcha, okay.
which means they'll be talking about it like tomorrow, so.
Yeah, I
Mr.
just,
Pentalian?
And Mayor, what we can do is, as part of the packet, put together information as it relates to how the rent amount was arrived at, and then an update on any discussions over the next 2 weeks.
Okay, next week.
Next week, yep.
Okay.
thank you.
All right, thank you. So now we're on to item 24.
Consider approval of Resolution 2024-173R, reconsidering the terms and conditions of City Council's prior approval of an interlocal agreement with the San Marcos Consolidated Independent School District for the city's provision of police officers to the school district to serve as school resource officers, authorizing the city manager or designee to execute said agreement on behalf of the city and declare an effective date.
Before somebody makes the motion, I have a question. If they make a motion to approve, is that approving what's in the packet that has, with or without the changes that we said we didn't want, that we rejected last time? I want to make sure somebody knows what they're making the motion for, and I want to make sure that the folks at home or watching this meeting later on know what that motion was.
So it's a couple of things. This isn't your classic Robert's Rules reconsideration.
Right.
Where the council, it's really a matter of, the school district apparently advised that they really want to stick with the 2-year term.
Right.
So really, I think there's a couple ways to do this. It's just simply a motion to maintain the status quo and not make a change to the agreement, or another motion, alternate motion to go with the original 2-year term as presented by.
Well, there was a couple of other changes in there, along with the 2-year.
Yes.
So basically, a motion to approve would be a motion to approve the item as it appeared in our packet last time?
Yes, the way the school district
As
approved it.
as the school district has proposed?
That's correct.
So that's what the motion would be?
That
Okay.
would be that, or alternatively, the motion to stay with the
No.
original version approved by council.
Okay, all right. So, is there a motion?
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve the original interlocal agreement with the San Marcos Consolidated Independent School District regarding the school resource officers, as was approved by the school board and brought to us originally.
Second that.
Okay. Discussion?
I just have like one blurb to say, and then I'll drop it, just so that you guys kind of understand the rationale from last time. So, deeply appreciate the work that Superintendent Cardona, City Manager, and the Police Department have put into the conversation. I think their care for our community's well-being is clear. Similar to what I expressed last time, I still have significant concerns about the proposed amendments that would extend the contract to 2 years and allow renewal without council input, the latter being the one that I am most concerned about. So like historically, the roles of superintendent and city manager have often been filled by individuals who, while professionally qualified, lack deep roots in our community. That's led to concerns about their connection to the unique needs of San Marcos. Ms. Reyes was born and raised here, and Dr. Cardona has fully immersed his family and his heart into our community. So I think it goes without saying that I have expressed on multiple occasions that I personally trust and appreciate their efforts. So this makes the conversation kind of awkward because I just can't let my personal biases blind me to the broader implications of this decision. These positions can change hands and often bring in leaders from the outside. I think we all know that. As elected officials, we have a duty to ensure that decisions about community safety reflect the will of all our constituents. Keeping elected officials in these discussions honors the trust our community has placed with us. And then just briefly, last time I touched on just a bunch of recent events like the tragedy in Uvalde, multiple community conversations regarding policing currently happening, and how I think it's really important to ensure transparency and accountability in school safety decisions. And I just feel like removing council oversight risk disconnecting these decisions from the people we represent. I did hear, and I really sat with and contemplated the notion that this is the ISD's lane, and I think the ISD does a wonderful job at a lot of things. Quite frankly, some of the things that I would want the city to be more responsible for, and I've said that before, but community wellness is all our responsibility, and what happens within the schools impacts the larger community, so that was my response to that. And then the last one is, we're gonna be changing council soon, so maintaining our voice in the decisions is really important. Yeah. One option that I was gonna present, or an idea, was for us to visit this during the council appointed tri-governmental committee that was established a while ago but has yet to meet, because this would also bring in the perspective of the university, which houses the Texas School Safety Center. So if the concern is that this is I don't know, I still don't understand the concern as to why we shouldn't talk about it on the dais, but that's one way that not everybody would have to contemplate it. It would just be a subgroup.
You're talking about the intergovernmental group?
Yeah.
That's the school district, us, and the county, not the university.
Oh, my bad. You see, since we haven't met.
We haven't met at one, so.
But yeah, I mean, that's just one way. Again, that's how I feel about it. But y'all are probably all gonna vote for it, so it's kind of pointless. I'm gonna shut up now.
I will make one notation, because I did vote to not do the 2 years. I'm going to go with this because that's the school district, that's their desire. If the mayor or 2 council members want to put this on an agenda for discussion, they can do that. There's actually a 30-day out in this thing, not that I'm suggesting that. But there's an opportunity to have a discussion a year from now, or 6 months from now, or whatever. So I'm going to vote for this. And if there's concerns, a year from now, or I would say probably better before the school's year has started, that can happen. So I'm going to change my vote. I'm going to vote for this time.
Mayor, then what you're saying is that we can bring that back and just cancel the contract?
Well, yes, the
I'm
contract.
not recommending that.
No,
Right,
I know,
Okay.
but
just
the
wanna make
contract does have a mutual 30-day termination provision, meaning the district or the city could terminate it. But it also, as the mayor said, presents an opportunity for, if there's some sort of dissatisfaction or need for community discussion, it can always come back. And, notwithstanding the 30-day termination, any contract can be negotiated again and revised. So the mayor's correct, that's an option for you in the
Right.
coming year.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to suggest we were pulling a 30-day in order to have a conversation about it again. We could have a conversation about it again.
I misunderstood. I figured you said 30 days from now. we
Oh,
can
no.
bring it back. No, as long as you can bring it back whenever.
It can go back on the agenda when,
Right, but what would trigger it coming back on the agenda? Something, you know what I mean? I don't know. It's really,
Well,
we
and-
forget a lot of things. If we didn't have things that were routinely on the agenda, we would forget them. And that's no shade to us as elected officials, except for the mayor.
I'm not arguing.
But I mean, you're usually the one to remind us. We serve at large with limited resources and no staff. So to me, it's
True.
what's
Put it on
what's
the
the point of just keeping it on here and then putting it on the calendar, AKA the agenda. But okay, you know what? I already know y'all are gonna vote for it. It's fine. I felt it important for me to voice my opinion. I'm gonna shut up now for real because I'm exhausted with everything.
Mayor, council, if I could propose a potential solution.
Go right
Every
ahead.
year I present a public safety update. I could be intentional, including the school resource officer program in the public safety update, so that it is constantly before you in a discussable format as it relates to public safety.
I think that's a great idea regardless.
Okay?
Good idea, thank you.
Hypothetical. What happens if we come to this next year with a new council and some of them decide,
It
well,
won't be
I
an
wanna-
all-new council.
well, but just some people that whoever comes on board may decide they don't want this. What happens if we have a us versus them situation with School board wants something and council decides they want something else.
I guess we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Well, we have to think about that now, that's called
Well,
preparing.
let's think about it. They're responsible for having someone in the schools.
Right.
Hayes School District contracts with the
County.
Sheriff's Department, correct?
Yes.
So this has worked for the two of us all these years. It would be Dr. Cardona's issue to determine what the best solution would be. Am I correct on that?
Correct. I think there's a couple of things, right? The 2-year contract builds stability from a safety standpoint. You know, we have a law that's in place to provide school marshals or police officers, and I think we have done a really innovative job of putting school marshals at the elementary school to allay some of the fears of some of the city council people of having an armed officer, you know, on campus in front of younger children. And if you would have asked me 8 years ago, I wouldn't be recommending a 2-year contract. I think with Stephanie Reyes, with Chief, with myself, with first responders who sit on our PTOs and our parent committees, with board members who sit on school safety committees, with Mr. Sandoval and myself, who meet with the chief and the police officers monthly, with myself and Mr. Sandoval, who meet with Ms. Reyes and the city managers monthly. I think we have safeguards in place to allay any fears. I mean, quite honestly, I've been here 9 years, and we have had 0 grievances regarding the police officer program. As far as I know, I don't think anybody has gone to the city, and the one person we did have that had a problem with an officer, well, that parent was wrong, and she was causing a safety issue, and she agreed to abide by our safety protocols at the high school. So I think we have a really good system set up in place. But quite honestly, I would prefer that Ms. Reyes or whoever the superintendent is handle that off of the dais away from politics, quite honestly. I try my best to keep everything away from the political nature. And then for the public to know, because we've talked about the public, I mean, the district absorbs the majority of the cost. We're about at 60% of the cost. Next year, it's going to be about 70% that we are absorbing. So quite honestly, the district should absorb the majority of what goes on. And our board members, just like you all, are elected by this, in many cases, the same constituents that have the same expectations for protecting our staff and our students and our families. And I don't think you will find, I know you will not find a better school district, and I know you surely won't find one where the police chief sat in on interviews for our school marshals, where one of our councilmen's spouses helped us develop the school policing model that incorporates mental health supports for our kids. And quite honestly, I don't want a line officer who is not trained like our SROs are trained coming into the building to deal with students who might be having an issue. And I think that's what the community needs to understand. These SROs have about 300 more hours of training that they are required to go to in addition to their normal training that deals specifically with how to de-escalate situations and how to decriminalize offenses. The criminalization of offenses is the last thing that we try to do in the school system, and that's because we have a really good relationship that tries to put wraparound services around our kids. And if anybody has a problem, my cell and my phone number, follow me wherever.
Trust, yeah.
Trust is a big deal.
Mayor, I got a couple comments.
All right.
You used the word that I used last time, and it's stability. And I was in wholehearted support of that because it is also one of my concerns that we have spring elections in May for school board. We have fall elections. That means every 6 months, this could become a political football on top of schools starting that quick with a new school board of getting them up to speed and potentially having a back and forth between the two bodies. Now, that discussion can be robust and good, but it also can cause delays. And a delay is the same as a de facto of not having a contract. And I don't want to lead the school district bound by any issues, on top of just the security issue in general. So I'm glad you're here, and I supported it before I even realized that the school board had supported it unanimously. And so I'm all in favor of the 2-year, and I've kind of come around on the administrative side of it. I was not aware of the 30-day removal, basically, revocation of the contract. And that gives me enough guardrails to let this happen administratively if it needs to, because of the one other word we used was trust. Between the two elected bodies and between the city manager and the superintendent and the chief and everybody. And I too have not heard really any complaints about the SRO program. So I'm wholeheartedly in support, and I'm gonna support the original agreement with the administrative part of it too.
Yeah, and I didn't know that y'all had meetings as often as you do, so that if anything comes up, it gets handled immediately.
Immediately.
And that's helpful. Ms. Gonzalez.
Thank you. One question, the cost. Are we losing any kind of funds by doing this, or y'all paying 100% for officers? Or 70 or 60?
60% this year.
Used to
Okay.
be
About
50.
60%? 60% this year
Right,
of the cost. Next year, it's about 70%.
right,
So it'll be significant for our district.
okay. Then we're putting half of the bill up.
They're paying more than half.
We're paying more than half.
They're paying 60.
Yeah.
It used to be 50.
Okay.
And I'm hearing it could be 70
Next year.
but that's not in this contract.
There are costs that are built in. I mean, it's the cost of everything, equipment, training, that we have to cover for the officers. So like your costs that you've been discussing all night, the same costs are going up and we absorb those costs.
Okay.
And I'm
That's the
sure
least we can do.
We're getting something in return.
Oh, yeah. We all get something in return.
Got you. Okay, that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Are we ready?
Well, hold on, before we vote,
Go
just
ahead.
Dr. Cadona, Chief Sanders, thank you so much for putting together this agreement. It's very important that we keep qualified, trained school resource officers in our schools, keep our schools safe. So thank you for putting this together.
Thank you very much. And thank y'all for y'all's service, all of y'all,
Even me?
especially you, my militant city council person.
I aim to please.
Okay, let's vote.
I'm voting no, but I still love all of y'all.
You can push the no.
Oh, and thank you, Chief, for putting it in the report of thingy of it all. I appreciate that. To talk about it.
Okay, the motion passes 6-1.
Okay, and
Thank you, Chief.
thank y'all, and thanks for being here, answering the questions. On to item 25.
Consider approval of ordinance 2024-45 on the first of 2 readings, terminating LaSalle Municipal Utility District Consent Agreement, acknowledging release of land from the LaSalle Development Agreement, and approving lease of land from the city's extraterritorial jurisdiction, including procedural provisions, and declaring effective date.
I need a motion first, and then Ms. Hernandez is here.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion to approve, Mr. Gleason, and seconded by Mr. Mendoza. Did you have a presentation? You here for answering questions?
However you'd like to handle it, I can do it either way.
It's pretty short, isn't it?
It's fairly short.
Go ahead.
Okay. This agenda item is a 3-part request from the developers associated with the Waterstone development, which is a name you all are probably familiar with. It's located north of Yarrington Road between I-35 and State Highway 21. And the reason you see LaSalle in the caption is because that's the original name of the development that's listed on these agreements. Quick history, city entered into a municipal utility district, or MUD, consent agreement and a development agreement in 2014. And the MUD consent agreement that's included in your packet is the most recent approved amendment, which was done in 2017. Next slide. This graphic shows the MUD consent agreement boundaries in black, and the general purpose of the consent agreement was to allow the developer to create a municipal utility district to pay for the funding of infrastructure, and it also required the developer enter into that development agreement. On the next slide, you'll see the boundary of the development agreement, which is much larger than the boundary on the previous slide. Since multiple property owners were included in the development agreement at that time, this development agreement has what we call an opt-out provision that said the property owner could write a letter to the city that they no longer wish to participate in the agreement, and they would be removed from those obligations. Next slide.
Is that standard in development agreements?
It's not. It was a unique provision that we've looked, it's only in this one.
Thank you.
In 2023, a handful of owners, those shown in red, had already opted out of the development agreement. And you can see that the remaining property is pretty much the exact same shape as that MUD agreement. So that's what we're talking about today. In 2023, those remaining property owners opted out of the development agreement as well, which means the agreement has no regulatory authority on any of these properties. Next slide. So again, talking about this being a very unique and three-part request, I changed the order of these based on what you're looking at in the packet, just because I feel like it's easier to explain in this way. First, we are, in tonight's resolution, acknowledging that the property owner is no longer part or party to that development agreement, and it's just acknowledging the opt-out section exists and that we've received the owner's request to opt out. Next, the second piece is the termination of the MUD consent agreement. Again, the property's in a unique situation that it was in the city's ETJ. However, the city was never going to provide any services. It's not in our CCN. The likelihood of annexation in the future is very slim and almost none based on recent annexation laws, as well as the debt that the MUD would incur. We would not want to take over that debt upon annexation. And then finally, the third piece is action to release from the ETJ. While staff at this time is not taking actions on requests for the ETJ releases, this development, again, in a unique situation, came in right at the beginning of that process where we issued a letter acknowledging the release and provided it to the applicant. So this approval is really a resolution ratifying that action. Next slide. I'm going to say it one more time that this development is in a very unique situation. I don't anticipate that we will see anything like this anytime in the future because this is quite a layered development. But given that the development agreement is no longer effective, the city will never provide services or annex the land. The city previously had no opposition to the creation of the municipal utility districts, which have already started to be created. Staff is recommending approval of the request as presented, and the applicant has representatives available if you have any further questions.
What have been our responsibilities with this agreement up until now?
Sure, so because of our interlocal agreement with the county, we would be responsible for joint review of all applications for things like plats,
You
PICPs.
said would be. We were.
We
weren't
were, yes, we were. We were actually reviewing plats, we were reviewing public improvement construction plans, what the roads looked like. We actually found ourselves in another unique situation that the development agreement said, build the roads this big, and the county said, well, we want the roads this big. So we were kind of having some conversations with the county about how to make this meet the agreement as well as the county requirements. And since their request to release from ETJ, we've turned over that requirement to review to the county.
So we're spending a lot of time with no hope of any revenue in the future.
That's
ever.
exactly what we were doing.
Okay. Any other questions? Ms. Trevino, we will vote.
Okay, the motion passes 6-0 with one absent. Apologies.
All righty. Thank you. Thank you for being here in case we had questions for you. We appreciate it. And now we are on to item 26, and did the thermostat change over into something late evening? It's kind of getting a little warm in here. Okay. Now I'm taking the sweater off, and you know, if I'm warm, everybody else is way too warm. Okay, Ms. Trevino, would you read us item 26, please?
Yes, ma'am. Provide an update on the new City Hall and Hopkins redevelopment project and discuss a creation and appointment process of a Hopkins redevelopment steering committee and provide direction to staff.
No open comments.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Kat Caffrey, your City Hall Project Director. This item, you got a little preview through an email and a memo, but it's been a few weeks, so just to refresh your memory, I want to start by giving you a brief update on where we are on sort of some very preliminary planning for new City Hall, and then really the bulk of the conversation tonight is to hear your thoughts on how you would like to form a committee to help guide this project. So as a reminder, in early August, the council approved a contract with Architects Lopez Salas to go ahead and do some preliminary space planning. And really what that does is it allows us to determine how big future City Hall needs to be, both for current needs and really an eye on the future with a lot of emphasis on flexibility. That information will also tell us not only how big the box needs to be for now, is what we're going to refer to it as, no shape or design yet, just sort of square footage, but also an idea of cost. That process has begun and should be done within the next 4 to 6 months. I'm hoping closer to the 4, but it may take a little bit, but we're working on that. Also, as a reminder, as the council's discussed before, these are the departments that will be included in the new City Hall. You can see the list up there. I'm happy to answer any questions on them. The only one I'd like to just call your attention to is you will note municipal court is not on the list, since the council gave us the direction to really invest in the new space they're moving towards. Any questions on that list of departments? Okay.
I guess basically the question is, who's not going in besides
Yeah.
what I call the Public Works Building? All those folks stay in their beautiful new building.
Neighborhood enhancement is not moving over, with the exception of utility billing, which is in there right now. So utility billing will come here to be with finance.
And do we mean utility billing, or are we talking about utility payments? Will there still be payments at the other place?
Sorry, utility payments is my understanding, yeah.
Be at both places?
No, will be moved to new City Hall.
All here? Okay, so neighborhood enhancement would stay in the building that used to be SPU, with all the outbuildings and? Okay.
And I think that's, well, obviously the library staying where the library is.
Good move.
And just Parks Administration would be moving in, but obviously all those activity center staff and the ones that are out in the parks would stay where they are.
And the stuff behind the animal shelters, all that, for the parks equipment and all that stuff stays?
At the water, where the water wastewater treatment plant is. So
Well,
that's
out-
where the parks
They
operations
call the
is
back
now.
40. And then animal shelter, of course, doesn't.
And animal
need
shelter will
notice.
stay where they are, the WIC offices will stay where they are.
Okay.
Municipal court will be going in to
Yeah.
a newly leased space. All of the public works, water, wastewater, electric utility, they will all stay
Yeah, I said
at the
that.
public services.
Yeah, okay.
I swear to God, if y'all don't give us council offices, I'm not even kidding, I'm will riot. With love.
Noted.
It's on the list.
It's on the list.
Yeah.
Now, is that an office for each council member or
better
council
figure it
space that
out.
we can each use?
I think we'll be going
Talking about
through
that.
that through design. There's a couple models that we'll see, it could be shared or individual. It's common to have shared offices, but we can talk about all that.
But we need something.
Yes.
Yes, because right now I have a
council members.
cubby that nothing fits in there. And
Yes.
I got a ticket for having to meet downtown with constituents, and it's ridiculous.
No, I've already made notes of,
Yeah.
definitely some office spaces, dedicated meeting space the council can use. Like, that is all on our radar, as well as a dedicated executive session room. I think larger council chambers, all of that is being factored into the space planning.
Yeah. Okay, hold on, Mr. Gonzalez, I'm sorry, Mr. Mendoza asked first.
Before I forget, my mic's not here, I can talk loud.
Use Mr. Gleason's.
I think they're all frozen.
Mine won't turn off.
The lighter the touch, the better it works.
No, they're like literally all frozen.
Yeah, mine won't turn off. I'm gonna move
Well,
away.
basically what I was gonna ask is, the utility payment. You had mentioned that it's going to just be at city hall. Is there any way that we can still keep something? I just hate the residents on that side of town to not have
Right.
the ability to go pay their utility bill, especially
Well,
with population.
actually, I shouldn't have asked that because that's not really what's on our agenda.
I just, not that this is on
It's
my-
something that
Tell
we
me
can
later.
talk about. I'll tell you that the thing that we've really worked on this time is because they were in two different places. And from a staff perspective, that was problematic. So that's why they're now together as one. So we would need to talk about if
Yeah.
we were gonna make a change.
Yeah, I think
Yep.
that's something we can note, because I do agree, a lot of people.
I
with
actually
that.
do agree
Yeah.
with you, but
So we can talk about that one
Yeah.
more.
another time. Okay, because we're planning on it for here. The place that's doing it now is already geared up for it, so that's something we can talk about another
Yeah, I
time.
mean, that's
Because we're agendized as far as this committee.
Yes.
Yes.
We
So
were
it's
just laying out what the committee was going to look at.
Which is a great segue to the next slide.
Oh, look at you, Mayor, segueing us.
Trying.
So we talked about this in, gosh, when was I here? Early July, I think was when I gave you your last presentation that sort of gave you a big overview. And so the role of this is to really be a temporary committee. They would provide guidance and feedback. They're really an advisory role. Nothing replaces the council's role in this project and in making binding votes, obviously. I suggested some kind of membership ideas, but really it's up to the council as to the number of members you would like on this committee. Staff would recommend 2 per council member, but again, that's completely to the council's discretion. And then we'd like to hear what your thoughts are on appointment process, and we are eager to get this group going to probably begin work in the fall if possible.
Okay, we just had an oxymoron there, is a smallish committee and 2, you're talking about 2 appointees for each council member?
Yes.
Okay. We went through this with the comp plan committee, trying to keep it small, and by the time we got through, and it was actually 3 each, then we said, oh, but we missed this, like the resident, and the this, and the that, so we ended up having to add all those on. So if we're talking about doing that, you're gonna have a committee of probably 20?
I'm into it.
Is that how many you're looking for?
I was suggesting that you could take into consideration the membership kind of ideal makeup when the council would maybe be appointing 2 apiece, but that again is of course the council's discretion.
We could do 1 each and make sure each of those constituencies is represented.
But we're not deciding that right now, right?
We're looking at, for example, here where she's talking about community partners, Texas State River Foundation, Downtown Association. Usually when we say like a certain organization, then we let them choose their representative to whatever it is, Convention Visitors Bureau, Main Street, whatever. And so if we figure out who we want to make sure is represented, and I'm so glad to see resident representatives, I would think there may even be, that might ought to be 2.
Sure.
And so then we figure out what we're going to do after that. So if we're talking about small, we need to decide what areas we want to make sure are represented.
Wait, we're doing that right now?
No.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Oh, I'm not prepared to have that
Yeah,
conversation.
let's think about it. Let's get the conversation started.
Yeah.
And figure out who we want to put on that list. And I looked at the comp plan, who we had for that, but I think you've done a good job here. I'm glad that you included the River Foundation because we are close to the river. We're close to downtown, we're close to Texas State. I agree that, I would say all those 3 should be, well, don't write it down yet. 'Cause
Okay.
it's not up just to me.
All right.
I also think this is our type of conversations where it would be helpful to have an equity lens. Part of the conversation that led to, and thank you guys, the support of bringing in somebody in that role stemmed from frustrations regarding the representation or lack thereof within council committees. So does that make sense? Like, I can't sit here and like freestyle this, even though like this type of stuff is, I feel like I'm pretty well.
So what do you need?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know.
Because I was hoping everybody had been thinking about it for 2 weeks, because this went on our last agenda, and we pushed it to this one for time.
I thought that you were asking like, are you guys down for this? And we're gonna bring some suggestions rooted in best practices when it comes to equity and inclusion, and based off of like a lot of the feedback we've had, like the conversations we've had on this dais regarding past compositions of committees. That's what I assumed, and I'm sorry I didn't ask for clarity.
So I know we sent out a memo about this coming forward, and so then we wanted to make sure that we had a conversation with y'all, and it wasn't just a, hey, now we want you to do something. So this was really intended to be an interactive conversation about, do we have the people represented up there as far as the organizations and things like that? Is there anybody else that we're missing? Because then we would like to go out and do a call for nominations.
Right.
So that, you know, it's not us asking y'all to appoint people tonight.
Right.
It's just being able to say, okay, are these the right representatives that we would want to make sure, you know, number, and then also who, you know, who it is that we're gonna call out to, so that we can work together with communications, and the clerk's office to
Right.
put together that call
Exactly.
for applications. So that's what the outcome we were hoping to achieve today.
So we're gonna pick 2 each.
I'm gonna say if we pick 2 each, we're gonna end up with 20 on the committee, and that's too many.
So
We're-
just one.
I'm gonna suggest 1 each, and then make sure that each of these groups, whatever the groups are, and that's what we're determining now. I'm saying she's got a good start, that's not necessarily.
But y'all may want other groups here.
Everything.
Right.
There may be other groups, and that's what we're starting a conversation. I'm thinking we might need to still return this to our next agenda while we continue to think about it, but this, we had to start somewhere. And
So.
that's
one-
this.
And Mayor, I'm gonna throw out, I would like to see 2 per council member.
Okay.
And then I would like to see us put a list of 6, 8 organizations to make sure they're represented. And they may end up very well being nominated by some of us, and we may
It's-
not quite get to 20.
That's possible.
Yeah.
That if, you know, there might be somebody I want to appoint and they happen to be one of those groups. We thought that would happen with the comp plan committee, and it didn't.
Well, I think this is gonna be a little different in that, with it being the city hall revamped, Hopkins Street. Having served on the bond committee, I don't remember exactly how many of us there was, maybe 25?
There was a bunch.
It was a bunch, and the big part of that was the more people we get involved in that, the more people are gonna be able to go out and make the pitch to the community
true.
about the project. And I would hate to see any of us kind of get bound by one, but I definitely want to make sure that the 6 or 8 organizations and businesses are covered. And we can look at that makeup after, you know, after we make our nominations, where, hey, we didn't get a downtown, we didn't get a Texas State. And if it's at 16, 18, 19, I think that's fine. I think the more the better, in that when this is all said and done, we're gonna have to make the pitch to the community. And I did a lot of that during the bond committee
You did. You did a
and
good job.
afterwards. So, I'm gonna suggest 2 apiece, and that we make a list of who we need to make sure we have on there, whether it's through the lens of equity.
And put council members on there.
Yeah, and I'm gonna volunteer for that one.
Well, you won't
Yeah, I
be a
won't be, but I will
council
be coming off.
member
It'd be a
anymore.
perfect
You
place for
would-
me to be right afterwards. I'm just gonna throw it out there.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Turn in your application.
yeah, so, but I think 2 apiece, and then making sure that we have all of these other partners.
Are y'all good with 2 each?
2 each, and then how many council members? I think we should have the mayor and a council member, or 2 council members, or a mayor, I mean.
I'm going to say that whoever the mayor is should be on this committee.
Yeah, and partially just to help keep the process, and there's gonna be information that council members or the mayor are gonna be aware of, past historical stuff, and look, this is gonna be some of the same stuff we discussed at the bond committee 9 years ago when I was on it. We discussed city
I'm gonna
hall
nominate
and revamp,
myself.
so.
Well, I don't think we're nominating the council members just yet.
No, I'm just throwing it.
So
out
we're
there.
going with mayor and 2 council members that we will choose, the council members we will choose. Yes?
Yes,
Yes?
yes, I'd like to do it.
Okay. And we'll take volunteers later. We've got resident Texas State.
Actually, Mayor, I do want to ask about Texas State.
Uh-huh.
Get a resident from Texas State, that's fantastic, and I know I'm gonna ruffle some feathers here and get people upset for what I'm fixing to ask, and,
What do you mean resident of Texas
well,
State?
it's somebody who attends Texas State University.
Oh, no, I'm talking about somebody in administration.
Why do we need Texas State to be involved with City of San Marcos?
Because
City
they're
Hall.
going to be our neighbors. We may end up with some shared parking. They're gonna be our neighbors with the ball fields across the street.
I guess my concern is we're involving entities that aren't the City of San Marcos. So we keep
Well,
getting
neither's the
arguments
downtown
with-
association, but I think
Well,
they should have a
I'm gonna go
say-so
there
in
too.
this.
I guess I'm just more concerned about having more residents and more citizens than we have as entities.
They would not, adding a Texas State person will not take away from any of the
And
rest of
actually,
them.
Mr. Mendoza, that's why I suggested 2, is that by the time you add 6 or 8 organizations, we're all gonna end up with some residents nominating one way or
Well,
another.
residents are fine, but we're talking about the tear that exists between the city, old school residents, and they feel that
Right.
Texas State
And
just
you could just
pushes
nominate.
themselves.
two,
It's
and you could
one.
nominate-
One of about 20. But there are neighbors, we're going to need to be
Yes.
working with them
I think
anyway.
we are gonna have to work with Texas State for the reasons you stated, but I hear you when, I don't know, this is why I would have preferred something that was like best practices, like some research done in like different ways communities have approached stuff like that, communities who have made maybe perhaps not formal, but informal commitments to being more intentional in community compositions, because what you said, like the regular residents, I think there is a distinction between residents who are affiliated with community partnerships and like regular schmegular working class folk. Does that make sense? So to me, it's difficult to make this, like, I feel like it's like a haphazard, I'm just like pulling stuff out the air, like, yeah, it's gonna be 2 people, and then it could be from this group, but then maybe not. And that's like, I'm not, it's hard for me to make any decisions without sitting down and doing like intentional research. I think that's the Virgo in me. And I do apologize if you guys did send a memo. I work full-time, and I get a lot of emails, and sometimes some take precedence over others. I must have just overlooked it.
I'm also going to suggest that there might be, and this may be more complex than it's worthwhile, but you would have voting members on the group, but we might want to pull some people in as subject matter experts. For example, the River Foundation could be a subject matter expert that they come in for issues related to that and being this close to the river, et cetera. And maybe they don't have a commitment to have to be at every meeting. We bring them in when we need them to advise the group. So we might want to consider that in some ways. And that's the only example I can think of off the top of my head, so it might not work. But again, subject matter experts, we might think of appointing some of those, which is different from a voting member of the committee and having to make every meeting.
I was thinking basically about the same thing, maybe getting someone that's handicapped to give us their point of view of,
Right,
you know,
which is
something completely
Which is
outside the
part
box.
of like somebody in doing the intentional research of like how to create these committees, right? Somebody would be like, okay, what are things that go into creating new buildings that are so important? Accessibility.
Right.
What, you know what I mean? Like instead we're just like
That's
freestyling it.
certainly a subject
Yeah.
matter expert, for sure.
Correct, but I'm just sitting here wondering like what other perspectives that we should like intentionally contemplate instead of freestyling.
Well, and each one of us get to contemplate 2 people, right? So
Right. Yep.
if you've got a subject matter that's really important to you, you can pick somebody to be on that particular.
Well, if it's
subject.
really important, we want to make sure that it's covered.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, and not just
Well, and
important to us as individuals,
Right.
but like based on,
Yeah.
does that make sense? Like, I'm not trying to say like we don't know our community, we do, but I do think that there's, like, why reinvent the wheel? I'm sure that somebody somewhere has contemplated different forms of engagement. Does that make sense? I just don't have the capacity to sit down and research that. I thought that's why we hired the DEI person.
Well, we can certainly get Grisel's input. Have y'all chatted with her regarding this in particular? Yeah, that would, I wholeheartely agree that that's a conversation that we should have. And so let's do that. And, Mr. Scott?
I can see in your face, you're overwhelmed with us just throwing stuff
No,
at you.
no, I just wanted to say that I was not, this list was simply a jumping off place. By no means
Right.
was it meant to be
Yeah.
prescriptive. It is absolutely a best practice to include immediate neighbors, which is why I specified resident representation from the nearby area. The neighborhood behind existing City Hall will definitely be impacted by new development, and so I felt like it was very important to specify them.
So,
Yeah, because we're not just talking about City Hall, and we're
Talking about
talking
this
about
parcel,
what's
too.
going to happen here, which is going to most likely be more intense than what's here now. Are we going to be talking about what's in that triangle between, after the railroad tracks? We're talking about what's going on in there too,
I mean,
right?
this group will really be not designing new City Hall, so I do want to be clear about that.
Right.
We are not asking them to weigh in on carpet choices
Right.
unless the council wants us to take it that direction. It is really intended to be much higher level on what conceptually we're trying to achieve, right? Placemaking, sense of place, an area that has activity, improving this corridor, and making sure there's a lot of opportunities for people to give input on what that looks and feels like, is the intent.
Yeah, well, let me finish that up, Mayor. You know how you have your name on almost every building?
No,
Anyway, you do.
several.
I think we should do something kind of different, you know, as far as our names. I think we should have look-alike bobbleheads that we can sit up there.
Noted, adding it to the list.
But it's really about having a group of kind of ambassadors, but also advising about the things that we need to take into consideration for this to be a successful project. And so, you know, things like, if we want to make this the people's house, we want to make City Hall be a more inviting place so that it doesn't keep people away, you know, what are those things that we need to consider? You know, is it having, you know, an art gallery? Is it trying to look at having some history stuff? You know, if it's a conference room, or it's, you know, stuff like the library has their community room, you know, where people can rent that out for free and be able to use that meeting space and things like that. So those are the kinds of things that we just really want to have some of that input to make sure that it's meaningful and that we have more support, buy-in, and like I said, the ambassadors that can go out and really, you know, tell others about within the community that may not be participating, that may not know about what's going on, a little bit more about the project. Like the bond election.
It's sounding more and more
committee.
like the bond committee.
Yes, it's sounding a lot like the bond committee.
Well, and like I was on the activity center one, and most of that appointed group became a political action committee to go out and sell it to the public for the bond issue that only passed by 18 votes.
Because, I mean, we as the city, obviously, when it's bond election, you can't really, you can educate, you know, but you can't advocate kind of a thing.
Right.
And so this isn't necessarily a bond election, but at least, but it is a project that we want to have community
You want
support
support.
for. And this is, I mean, we're really, we've still been going through name stuff, but we're really kind of focusing more on Hopkins City Center because it really is within the city and it is within our center of the community. It's the heart, you know, of our community besides when, and of course, there's the downtown and those other areas that are looking at it, but it's all gonna connect to those hearts. So, just wanna be able to have that. That's really the ultimate goal and outcome in terms of what this group would do. And making sure that we don't have pitfalls like Catherine mentioned, Ms. Caffrey mentioned, is just that, you know, whenever we have the neighborhood, you know, that's adjacent, we don't want it to look like we've just been tone deaf to what the needs, desires, and concerns would be of them, so.
Right.
Yeah, and let me clarify, when I was on the Activity Senate Committee I was not a council member, that was before I was a council member, so it had nothing to do with being a council member.
But you were on that committee though, weren't you, Mayor?
The activity, yeah,
Yeah,
but
I know
not as a council
I
member.
know your name's
That
on the
was-
plaque in there as not a council member. It's
My name's on there 3 times.
Yeah.
The committee, the PAC, and then
Yeah,
by the
I
time the
saw
building was built, I was on the council and got my name on the
And now
front.
we'll have bobbleheads.
Well, I'm gonna pull
I
Shane
don't
Scott.
bobblehead.
I'm gonna pull a Shane Scott and say, hey, I'd like to be on that committee also since I live in Rio Vista.
Right.
But,
Just gonna throw it out there.
but you are a resident.
I am a resident as well, absolutely. Not going anywhere anytime soon, so just throwing it out there.
I am a bit further confused. I just wonder, okay, so like I get the ambassador part, I get the providing feedback part. What is interesting to me is, and this is why, again, somebody else should be doing the research on like power dynamics, on all of that, because it's like, do we want people who are gonna give us critical feedback, or do we want people who are going to just say yes and go promote the situation? Or is there like a timeline where it's like, let's have like very legit conversations, and then once, you know, there's buy-in, then we charge you with going out to the community? Does that make sense? Because like, as
And that's gonna be up
otherwise,
to
there's
us
like
as
a
we appoint our people.
Yeah, and-
situation.
And that is gonna be part of it.
Right.
Exactly, because
But-
like, depending on who you, so this isn't gonna be the only feedback that we're gonna get. We're gonna have to do some community engagement, obviously.
Well, you do community
and do that
engagement with the residents, there'll be
At large.
something there. There won't just be the people on here. There will be
Right.
Right.
extensive engagement, I
Right,
assume.
One
so
thing-
who are those, who are those folks that we need to make sure we engage with? What does that
Yeah.
plan look like?
Right.
And so that group, they'd be advising us to kind of make sure we're considering those things, so that if there are pitfalls, or if there are things that we really need to make sure that we don't have blind spots to,
Yeah.
that we have people that can be thoughtful and advise us in terms of that. So I think it's a little bit of both, Councilmember Gaddisai. I think it's first having people that really understand more of those dynamics to kind of help us make sure that we can think about those things very critically when we go into our community engagement piece. So we want people who can help us make sure that we have a successful
I want people to ask
process.
questions
Yes.
and to challenge.
I'll throw it out there. The bond committee was very robust. We had very deep discussions about how the bond should be laid out, what bonds might be individual or not, or what's a priority. It was very robust. And you get 20 different constituents on there with these different organizations, there's going to be some very good discussion. So I think that kind of plays out depending on who we pick, and you're right, that's not the only public engagement, that's just a part of it. And then you have the ambassadorship kind of afterwards, and that people can explain it. I mean,
There'll be a subset that will do
I
that.
still know things about the facilities in this community because of the bond, and I would not know about them even as a council member.
Because y'all visited everything.
We went to every single facility in this town that the city owns. So I think they're very informative. I think they always end up being very robust, and that's why I'd like to see a little higher membership count, because I think it does create more robust, it's like herding cats a little bit, but you get a different dynamic and perspectives.
So, are y'all in enough that if we put this back on our next agenda, we'll be ready to
Yep.
make a determination of the groups? That will not be enough time to have the information out to the public and have applications in. That will happen at a later date.
Will we be able to also get the guidelines for this as well? So we have some of our boards and commissions that require you to have a certain amount of residency, and are we going to have those same guidelines for these groups?
Yeah, like what are the expectations?
Well, let's back up. I'm going to say city resident only. Are we good with, they have to be city resident?
I would really be discouraged if we had somebody who's going to live here for 6 months.
Well,
on that
let's
committee and
go
not
with
somebody-
resident,
Okay.
yes?
5 years.
No, I'm just, resident, yes or no, then we'll talk about how long.
Okay, resident, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Resident, okay.
That-
Resident, and
Got
now
it.
we're talking about how long.
Is it possible, does anybody have the capacity to put together some recommendations rooted in best practices or what other folks, and like
Yes.
diversity and inclusion?
Yes, I will get with Grizel tomorrow.
Right, I appreciate it.
Okay. And I want to go back to resident length of time. Now, the application asked how long you've been here. And whenever we are making our appointments, I often take into consideration how long they've been there. Sometimes it's balanced out by experience for that particular board. So I kind of take all that into consideration. Do we want to just flat say it's got to be X years, or do we want to just, as we make our appointments, consider that?
I think we can just consider it.
That's what
That's up to the individual council member for their appointment potentially.
I'm a hardliner for a certain amount of years just because
then,
we are talking
then how
about
many
City
years?
Hall.
Got to pick a number.
I'm thinking just a minimum of 5 years.
I think we should wait to hear what best practices are, right? Because I feel like what are you basing that off of, like a vibe, you know?
Well,
No,
whatever we put on the
commitment
list
to-
now, it's all up
Yeah.
for discussion next time.
Right.
We want someone that has some history here. that
We need somebody who
knows.
understands what the City Hall was. I guess we need somebody who sits here and says, well, this is the effect. I'm not going to leave here in 5 years to go find something better. I want to
I
intend to be
think that's a
here."
super valid thing to
Just to have us-
consider.
yeah.
Like, but again, there's so many moving pieces that I feel like it's just one factor that we have to consider with the whole. But I do think it's important to name, but I think there's,
Sure.
does that make sense? Like, is there models where it's like, okay, we're gonna have X amount of people where it's like a solid X amount a year, and we've seen that this has, you know, been an effective way to balance out these other factors, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
Okay, I've got two people that want 5 years.
why are we deciding this right now?
I don't know if I wanna
Freestyle.
lock
I'm
it
just
in.
putting it, we don't have to, I'm just putting it on the list. It's all up for discussion next time. We just
What
had
do-
two people who felt really strongly about it, and I'm not going to ignore them, same as I
Yeah.
don't ignore you when you're speaking.
Mayor, I'm
Ms.
not
Garza.
saying you're ignoring, I'm just saying like, that, it's just, whatever.
What do we have for P and Z?
So silly.
Is it
5
4
years.
5 years, that's
It
what I
just makes you
thought.
feel good, I'm sure that's what it is.
Yeah.
Y'all are ridiculous.
We can look at, let
let's
us
just
look at
put-
some of the boards and commissions and y'all's requirements. Let us get with.
The only one with requirement is P and Z,
P&Z.
5 years. It's only a year to be here. CBOA have a residency? I don't know.
And we can make some of those recommendations by looking at that, you know, I mean, I'm hearing that, yes, y'all want somebody that has some roots and some history.
Yes.
So we can definitely look at that. Anything that we do, we can propose, and then y'all can always, you know, have the discussion and
We can
change some of
decide,
that.
and at minimum, if we don't decide, that's a consideration that each person can take into consideration when they're appointing their two people.
Right, and then we can, and then we'll do the call for applications once we get all of that with the criteria out there and work with comms and city clerk to do that.
Okay, and I have a question. And often when we're talking about land planning, we have planning and zoning commissioners on that committee. Do we want one or two planning and zoning commissioners to be on this committee? I'm just throwing it out there. Let's put it on the list. And I do,
One, at least one,
yeah. And let them choose?
let them choose.
Okay, one?
Don't matter to me, one or two.
I don't see the value of it, that's just me.
Well, we're talking about land planning. We
Yeah.
just generally do.
All I'm thinking about is use for me, so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Not me personally, but yeah.
Let's put it on the list, and if we don't come to agreement, that might be what
yeah.
one of us will choose.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, having that perspective is important, but for stuff like that, like, it would be helpful to give like different options, like, do different entities approach it, like, you know, that whole P and Z entity should have like a separate conversation where they contemplate it very
Yes.
meaningfully and then send a report, or like, I feel like there's different
It'll go
ways.
to 'em.
Right, like, there's different ways
Okay.
to engage those entities that we find important, and that's kind of, ideas is what I'm looking for.
I'm just gonna throw this out there. Somebody from the library board, they will be the neighbor. Just put it on the list to consider.
Are we gonna go as picky as we have to make sure they have their taxes paid?
We don't for any other board.
I mean, someone making decisions on the building and doesn't even pay their taxes. I'm
Doesn't
just throwing it
prevent
out
them
there.
to running for office.
And hopefully, I mean, they're not getting into the financial aspect of all of this. Like, it's really just about making sure that we really understand and know what are the needs of the community, what are the wants of the community, what are the things that really they want this building to symbolize. You know, so that's the high level. We'll get into the technical and make sure we have our financial advisors to help us on that
We
piece.
talked about that in P and Z years back.
So.
Yeah.
One thing I would throw out is I would like to see a little bit of a concrete list of groups that we should cover. Whether,
Okay.
like, you know.
That's what we're doing now.
No, I know. And then there could be some other suggestions, like the library board and stuff, that would be nice to cover, that would just be like extra potential qualifications. But I don't want to tie our hands with too many organizations, and then we end up with that list, and then you
Well,
don't end
remember-
up with residents and,
We can still have people that are subject matter experts
yeah.
as
of course.
opposed to members of the
And that's-
committee
and
that
that's
will
what we-
get called in
And
for,
that's what they did with the bond committee. Whenever we'd have a particular issue come in, they would bring in those particular
right.
experts and talk about that.
Okay, so we will see this again. Will there be time for our DEI person, her last name just jumped out of my head. I know her first name, and I'm trying to use Ms. Pettis Carey, to give some thought to this, and we could still put it on the next agenda, because like I
Yeah.
say, that's like a conversation tomorrow or within the next few days.
I think so. I think if we pull kind of like the bond committee, if we look at some of our other boards and commissions, get her she just did the stuff with Dr. Ray too, with like kind of an equity cabinet and
Right.
stuff. So I think that there will be some, she'll have some good frame of reference that she can assist and help with. And just so y'all know, I know that, and this is something I've been talking about with the city management team, even as recent as today, is just trying to really operationalize her more on some things. Because it does come in where we're talking with y'all and you're like, oh, has the equity officer looked at this? And so there's that expectation, but sometimes it's that we're not by default going to her and saying, hey, can you look at this? So we're all gonna work on that to make sure that we're doing that, because the things that she does work on and that she has worked on, and that she has been working on, she's done a really fantastic job. And we wanna make sure that we are looking at things from all perspectives.
So the answer is yes.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So we'll see this, if
Yes.
if they can
Oh,
get that done
gotcha.
in time for this to go on the next
Yeah.
agenda.
And I don't know if this is like a big ask, or maybe this is something we can work on our own time, homework, on top of all our other responsibilities. But to Mr. Gleason's point about, and Mayor, the subject matter experts, like, I think it would be helpful for us to develop like a internal Rolodex of folks. Like, I feel like it lives in people's noggins, like, oh, if we wanted the expertise of people who are familiar with river stuff, it's like, oh, it's River Foundation, da, da, da. But I do think,
And the Meadow Center.
yes, I think that would be helpful to, at least for us to contribute to something that could be then maintained, like, by, I don't know, you know what I mean? Like, because I know y'all have made strides in like creating these kind of directories of sort, but new entities and stuff like that pop up all the time. I feel like we know, like, subject matter experts in the community, so maybe we could just like bring those ideas to the next meeting, and then give them to y'all to use for whatever else too.
That'd be great, 'cause like, we're gonna come up with the things that we know about and things that we're thinking, but y'all may say, oh, I don't see this group represented, or something like that. And so, so that's what we're gonna look to y'all, is to kind of make sure, are we on the right track, and fill in any gaps that we may have missed, so that then we can work through that with Ms. Trevino and also Ms. Surley, just to make sure that we're doing the call for applications and putting the things out there in terms of the criteria, what we're looking for, who we're looking for, and all of that, to make it as clear as possible.
And that call won't go out until we've crystallized our
Correct.
thoughts.
Correct. Yeah, no, we want this to be set up for success. We want to make sure everybody feels good about it. And so just having the conversation, we know that this is an important project, and that's why we're willing to have as many conversations as we need to for y'all to feel good, because it's important to have
Well,
that
it's not like we got to point them
solid
tomorrow.
foundation. Right. But
All
the
right.
sooner the better.
Yeah, that's fine.
Well, yeah.
To get us
but
moving.
No, that's fine.
Doesn't have to be tomorrow, or today. Okay,
right, thank
so, that will close out item 26 for this agenda, and we will go to item 27. And we've got two short things, and then we're done. So, Ms. Trevino, item 27, please.
Consider approval by motion and hold discussion regarding the proposed 2025 city council meeting schedule and provide direction to staff.
Council, y'all were given a copy. There was one in the packet. You will notice next year, we do have the council meeting on the day after the election. Ms. Trevino, on November, no, I'm sorry, it's October. We have that because the 7th is going to be National Night Out. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
I'm going to suggest that whenever we need to move a meeting, that we not move it to the Monday, that we move it to the Wednesday. That gives staff more time to answer questions, more things to happen. But the main thing is that for the public, if we have it on Monday and somebody's geared up for Tuesday, they realize they've missed it. If they're geared up for Tuesday, they don't come in and go, oh my gosh, we missed it. It's going to be tomorrow.
Is there a way to have that for Wednesday for October?
I'm talking about that let's
The
do it the
October.
8th instead of the 6th. The
Yeah.
7th is National Night Out. So,
I'll
am I
second.
correct on that?
Yes, Mayor, I just placed it because of the city code. It has the first Monday of that month for the National Night Out. That's why I placed it, but we could always change it, yes.
Oh,
It
wait,
also
what?
says go to the election to the Wednesday.
Right,
So,
and that's why I added. on the
well,
city
then,
code. But it's
let's,
council.
and that's in the code, not in the charter. So perhaps you could bring that back with this? Is that,
Yeah, Mayor, I'm a complete agreement with you. You know, whether it's a 3-day weekend or getting responses to the message board, giving staff
Yeah.
additional time, the public more time, I prefer it to be on a Wednesday.
I'd rather they have an extra day than one less day, which
Yes.
they might miss.
Well, it's an extra couple days for the pack, it's one less day for us with the packet too. It's just
Yeah.
one less day for us to communicate.
I
A
agree.
business day.
I think one time we did back it up, but that was like in this case, because Texas Municipal League Conference started on that Wednesday. And that's why we've done that, but it doesn't happen that way in
That's fine.
2025.
I just wanted to
That's why we did it before.
state that, but yeah.
Because I remember it was National Night Out, go home and pack, and then drive out Wednesday morning, a couple of years ago. Okay, do y'all have anything else? I will say that Mr. Trevino has put appointee evaluations on here based on previous. Those could change depending on if we change anything next year. And of course, there may be other workshops as needed. No, the gray are holidays.
Oh, right, okay, I was like, gray or holiday?
No, the gray are holidays.
Okay. It's gonna be on a Wednesday.
The pink is evaluations.
Yes.
So what are y'all discussing over here? What do we need to do?
We're both gonna run next time around.
On a selfish note, I was talking to Mr. Gonzalez, he and I are both up for election next year.
Uh-huh.
And we're saying, okay, well, we have election on that Tuesday, the 4th of November, and we have the council meeting the day after.
That's what we usually do.
Um,
Except for this year, we missed it, and I put it on the next agenda to move that meeting, and I'm hoping that we don't have public hearings or something. I went back and watched the meeting, because I went, how in the heck did that happen? We got wrapped around the axle on the January meeting, which was gonna be like the 2nd, and so we moved it to the 5th Tuesday, and we didn't even talk about the election, which was set to be the day before. And we've always had it on, pushed it to Wednesday.
You can't have a
Now,
council meeting the day before.
Oh, no,
I
I'm
know,
just kinda
but
going
it's on our
after.
calendar for this year.
I know.
Okay, so if y'all will listen to me, I'm going to, Mr. Gary's not gonna be happy with me. We're gonna have charter next year. Is the 22 meetings, that's in the charter, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
It's in the R.
We used to have 24, and when we started taking off in the summer, we brought it down to 22. I'm going to suggest, when we do charter, we might look at 20. We might skip the first meeting in January. And there was somebody that I saw on TV the other day and said, we don't have a meeting, that first meeting in November, because it's election time. Now, I don't know if we want to do that or not, but still, I'd like to give us some more flexibility. We can still do the 22 if we want, but there's times when it just might make sense to skip one, skip another one. So anyway, I don't remember who that was, but they said, we're not going to have a meeting the week of the election.
Yeah, I
I
mean.
don't remember what city it was,
That
but
might be.
regardless.
That would be nice.
But, well, that's for a discussion for another day. But are y'all good with this meeting, I'm sorry, with this calendar, with the change to, do I need to make a motion to amend? So we can vote on October 8th?
Motion to move the October 6th meeting,
Yeah,
October 8th.
I'll second that.
It is by motion.
Wait a minute. Would you make a motion to adopt this with that change?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
We still have to vote on the amendment, I think.
No, you could just,
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
normally like to include it, but I think in this
Yeah, yeah,
case
you're
it's all
okay.
right.
Motion to approve with the change of the 8th, October.
Okay, and did you second that? Okay, you're seconding that, and this is following the pattern that we have used for the last few years of skipping a meeting, one in June and one in July. The council used to skip 2 in July, which jam-packed August way too much. So
And it
this
can
is
potentially
what we
make
do.
6 or 7 weeks between a meeting. I didn't like that, and I didn't like it when P and Z did it either. I like the one, at
Yeah.
least one meeting a month.
Well, and we still have that budget workshop
Yeah.
on June 26th. Ms. Reyes, I assume that y'all have looked at this and everything was good for y'all. Are y'all good with the October 8th? Okay.
I do have a question about actually the week after, November 17th and 18th.
Uh-huh.
I see that we are swearing in on November 17th
Uh-huh.
instead of the regular city council meeting.
We always
So-
do that separate.
Well,
Do
on 20, I'm sorry, in 22, we did the swearing in at the same time we had our first meeting.
I don't think so.
Yeah,
We have done.
We've done, that's, it was my very first meeting.
We normally don't.
Okay, so that's.
It may be just, see, we can't swear in until, what is it, 10 days after the election?
Results.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to wait, and then,
Canvassing results.
you have to wait and do the canvassing, and you have to do the canvassing, and what you don't want is you don't want a council meeting and then canvass afterwards.
Wait, how are you up for reelection already? I'm over here just like,
They're looking, well, we're looking at 2025.
Well, I'm looking at
oh,
2022,
gotcha.
so
I was like, man, I'm bad at space and time and reality. Okay. No, that makes sense. That
Okay.
makes sense about
So
waiting
so
the
we're
10
gonna come
days.
in on the 17th, do the swearing in, and then if
Jump
there's a
into the
different
meeting.
council, they would take over on the 18th.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
The swearing in turns into such a party with people celebrating and all that.
Yeah.
We would have to, and then people like to go celebrate afterwards. What we'd be doing was that we'd have to run everybody out of here
Yeah.
that didn't, that was still partying. If they wanted to sit quietly in the chairs, that's okay. And that's a real downer after the swearing in and celebration. We used to do it that way.
Why don't we do it last year we did it,
I don't think so.
No, they didn't.
because we voted.
No,
No.
no.
I know my year we
Yes,
did.
You vote on officers at the swearing in. No, no, it's the next meeting.
That's what-
It's just the swearing in,
It's just the
Mr.
swearing in.
I
Mendoza.
That's
believe
it.
y'all do choose mayor and pro tem. I think that's what we
That's
did
why in
last year.
2022 and
I
then
think
2023.
yeah, but that's all.
That's-
Yes.
And then,
I'm just gonna be the queen.
we don't have a real meeting.
Maybe, Mr. Mendoza, you're talking about or referring to, back then, I got the election results after I posted the agenda, and then the ordinance had to be amended because of that, maybe?
I just know that in 2022, I gave my acceptance, hello, how you doing, and I replaced my
And all you did-
predecessor.
And we
No,
just,
we had
And you
a-
voted on Mayor Pro Tem.
yeah,
That was
we
it.
voted.
That was it, really?
Mm-hmm.
My
That's-
apologies then, okay.
Before the
Then
meetings.
I'm just missing it all, okay.
Okay, so we have a motion to adopt this calendar as presented with the exception of moving the first meeting in October, which we moved because of National Night Out, to the 8th. And is there anything else? If not, let's vote.
Okay, the motion passes 6-0 with one absent.
Okay, next item 28, please, Mr. Trevino.
Appoint a delegate to attend the business meeting at the Texas Municipal League Annual Conference in October.
All right, what the business meeting is, it's at like 4:30 on one of the days, so you have to stay for that. They do resolutions, elect officers, doesn't take too terribly long, except for the resolutions can take a while. We need to have one person, so the first question is, who's even going? I'm not,
Oh, you're not? I was gonna say, isn't it always you? Let's just send you. I mean,
I'm not going to the conference this year.
oh, no, Mayor.
Mr. Mendoza's going. Maybe we can talk him into.
Who else is going?
I'm going, but
Because,
I don't have the attention span for that, not in that setting,
Do
no
you want to go to
offense.
this special meeting that's at like? Mr. Mendoza doesn't mind.
I don't mind either, it's really, I'll be there. So,
Because you have to show up. If we elect you as a delegate, they have to show up.
I'll nominate myself,
Okay.
sure. Make it easy. God dang.
Go show up and show out.
I'll be there, all
I
right.
will make a motion that we appoint Mr. Mendoza as our delegate to the Texas Municipal League Annual Conference that will occur in October of this year.
Dang. I don't think we've ever like not had the mayor. Oh, do I have to second that? or-
Somebody needs to.
Second.
Okay, thank you.
Better take good notes. Nah, I'm just kidding.
We need to vote.
Oh, yes.
Okay, motion passes 6-0 with one
Now you can
absent.
thank us.
Thank you to my colleagues, I appreciate it. Thank you,
Imagine
guys.
we all vote no. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. On to item 29, Ms.
The city-
Trevino.
Yes, ma'am. The city council will convene an executive session pursuant to section 551.071 of the Texas Government Code, consultation with attorney to receive legal advice regarding the terms and conditions of the amended and restated Regional Hayes Caldwell Counties Area Water Supply and Treatment Contract with the Canyon Regional Water Authority.
As always, the executive session items are posted at our 3 o'clock work session and our 6 o'clock meeting. We did have this executive session at our 3 o'clock work session, and we concluded it. We put on the 6 o'clock in case we don't get it finished. We did get it finished. We do not need to go into executive session. On to item 30, please.
Consider action by motion or provide direction to staff regarding the executive session item discussed during the work session pursuant to Section 551.071 of Texas Government Code, consultation with attorney to receive legal advice regarding the terms and conditions of the amended and restated Regional Hayes Caldwell County's area water supply and treatment contract with Canyon Regional Water Authority.
And we did have that, we did have the legal advice given to us. We did have a discussion, and we provided direction to staff. Next item is question and answer session with the press and public related to items on this agenda. Anybody? Okay, anybody signed up?
Yes, Professor Capoletta.
Ms. Capoletta?
Hey, thank you, Ms. Trevino. I got a couple questions for y'all. I was listening to this discussion on the City Hall Committee, and it just reminds me of a lot of the themes I covered in my speeches tonight about matrices of domination and seemingly objective processes for a bond measure when you guys just passed a bunch of increases. And so I'm really wondering if you guys really want a pitfall person. I would ask that as you roll this out, that you would ask the questions. These are my questions. Has the city considered the artifacts that are currently under City Hall? Many residents have reported finding of bones, human remains when they made the activity center. Additionally, I'm very concerned that the captioning on this agenda, we all thought y'all were going to make a new road down Hopkins, quite frankly. When you call it a city, what the Hopkins redesign project, why don't you just say new City Hall and bond election? Right? I mean, that in itself is very duplicitous. And I believe that equity begins with how you caption that agenda and you're transparent about that process. So I'm just wondering why you guys haven't called it the new City Hall and bond election. And then I guess the other thing I wanted to ask you guys is when you go through the bond election and then in future when you're working with your equity officer and you guys talk about these increases, I would kindly ask that you start to phrase them in increases that most people can understand in terms of income level. So like an exemplar case study was like when Israel was attacked, right? People would say it was like the state, this many states in America, these many people were killed, right? So you could say, okay, I live in America and I know how big this state is, or I know how many people live here, I can make a relationship to that, right? And so I think if you say with someone who lives on $20,000 a year, this equates maybe $2,000 more, even though it's really this much. That way people have a way to envision it. The other thing I wanted to ask is why you guys didn't have any conversation about access. There was a lot of conversation last time, and I was kind of looking forward to you guys pulling that trajectory through. And then my final question is, and there was some falsehoods, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, at the Ethics Review Commission where a citizen stated that Dr. Kathy Erin Martinez Prather does not work for Texas State. You guys had a conversation tonight about the Student Resources Officer, and I'm seeing here, I pull at Texas State, she's Director of School Safety Center, Texas School Safety Center, and I'm not understanding why Mr. Prather did not recuse himself. Those are my questions, and I do look forward to your answers tonight.
Okay,
I will say the new City Hall is agendized as the new City Hall. Item 26 on the agenda, provide an update on the new City Hall and Hopkins redevelopment project. So it is called as the new City Hall, and it will not be a bond election. It's something that will be financed in a different way. We don't know what that mechanism is going to look like ultimately, but it's not a bond election. It's something that the city will look at alternatives for funding.
Yeah, we were
Thank you if I could just thank the city manager. Thank you, Stephanie. I appreciate you saying it's not going to be a bond election. And if it said City Hall in a caption, then my apologies. I work a lot of hours and I just kept looking at Hopkins redesign program. What is that? What is that? And I was talking to my friends. I'm like, yo, I think they're going to be redoing Hopkins again. So thank you for that correction. I apologize, Mayor. I cut you off, but I wanted to thank her.
Oh, no, that's fine. Would you, you said something about the Ethics Review Commission, and Kathy Martinez Prather working.
It was the SRO, yes, ma'am. I was just giving
did
context.
recuse on the SRO, okay, that's
What,
what I'm.
yeah,
okay.
Mayor, what I was asking was, why did Jude not recuse himself on this agenda item? Because it's about SROs, and my understanding from reading her job title, that is, I don't know, does she train all the SROs,
No.
or what does she do?
No.
And it,
She
okay.
does not train them.
I mean, she.
So,
they
but she
create
works for the
curriculum
school-
For every school.
Yeah, so that's totally
Wait,
related.
hold on, everybody. Ms. Garza has perhaps an explanation.
I mean, I'll just leave for staff to answer it, but they're the entity that creates all the training for the state of Texas.
But they
for
don't
school
do the
risk
training,
officers.
correct?
They have a whole department that does the training. They have their Texas School Safety Center
They do?
conference every year. It's
Okay.
great work. Like, I used to work there for full transparency.
Yeah, and I love her.
that's
She's
good.
great.
Okay.
I think she would be better than you, Jude, quite frankly. I think she's absolutely brilliant. She's absolutely brilliant. But I just find it as a conflict of interest, and I find it troubling that
I
it's
think
been
that's a
said
question.
that she-
That's
Yeah,
a
well, I
question
mean,
for Mr. Prather and Ms.
No, for the
Capoletta.
attorney. It's a question for the attorney, is what maybe if Sam
Ms.
can shoot me an
Capoletta,
email.
I'm gonna mute you if you don't stop, because remember, you have had your 3 minutes to ask your questions. I'm trying to clarify what your questions are. This is not a time to continue on and back and forth and back and forth. We're trying to answer your questions. We're trying to get clarification. It's our turn to talk now. So we will see if we can get a response for you. And for your first question, Ms. Reyes, is it safe to say that for any construction that we will do, we will follow all the rules regarding environmental artifacts, et cetera, at such time that that happens, that we will follow all those rules? Okay. So I think the answer was, would we? And I think the answer to that is yes. So.
The rules are for larger areas, and that's a very pristine area. So I've gone through
Ms.
this.
Capoletta,
Mayor.
you've asked your
That's what-
question.
yeah,
I'm
that's
going to hit the
fine.
mute
And it-
now.
Go ahead.
Okay. So we have her questions. We know what they are. We've answered most of them. We'll figure out what the other ones are, get a response, and I think we can adjourn our meeting now. I'm looking for a motion, or I'll just adjourn it because we have no business left. I'll take Mr. Gleason's motion. Take Mr. Mendoza's second, and let's vote.
My mic. Mr. Scott? Are you, oh, okay. Yeah, miss, okay.
We got our fingers over these
You are ready
buttons.
for, okay. There you go. Mr. Gonzalez? Motion passes 6-0, the one absent.
Okay, everybody wants to go home. We're getting out of here at 9:43.